Brilliant. So this should be, hopefully everyone is passing over now. We're just getting our tech sorted our end. I can see that people are in the chat, so hopefully you're starting to follow on over. So we're just going to pay one of our other sponsors while hopefully everyone is just finishing off their cups of tea and sandwiches from lunch. So Tom, if you wouldn't mind pressing play on the Wellbe video for me, please.
Yeah.
Wellbe is a systemized solution which helps improve staff well-being and build it into your school culture. You can see where you are now and plan where you want to be. Using the evidence-based survey, the Health and Safety Executives Indicator tool, you can see your staff members' scores in your online dashboard. This shares a full report including analysis, benchmarks and heat maps. Use our suggested priority actions, which means it's much easier and faster to take positive steps. Staff also share their comments, providing further insight into actions needed, and you're able to respond to them anonymously, creating greater engagement. Wellbe allows you to easily share your results with staff and governors using a PowerPoint presentation which you can easily download. You can book a results review call with a wellbeing expert and let us help you set the right goals and actions to achieve the outcomes you need. With Wellbe Voice, you can follow up on post-survey actions and track progress over the next 12 months. You can also use it for anything else, where staff anonymity will help. For example, with consultations or following a change. Send staff members a message, ask a question or seek feedback. It's as easy as sending an email. The one difference being, it is an anonymous conversation. You can invite all staff to take part or groups as little as 8. This means that you only need to invite relevant staff, such as those affected by the changes you've made. This might be teachers, support staff, middle leaders, teaching assistants, or any group of staff in your school. You choose the titles you use. Staff receive their invitation by email, click on the button to respond through a web page, only they see and are able to send you their feedback. You see this in your school dashboard, where you can read and choose to respond if you wish. You can set up multiple users across your leadership team to share workload and enable others to seek feedback from their team. It really is that easy. Our online user guides make sure Wellbe's survey and voice are quick and easy to use.
Okay, that was Wellbe, who are one of our main sponsors. If you want to check them out, it's welbee.co.uk, welbee.co.uk. It's all about kind of surveying, staff surveying. It's not all about that, it's about staff well-being, but it's a tool to enable that and facilitate that. Just before I pass on to Lizzie, the hashtag is still hashtag TMEnglishicons. On Twitter and on YouTube. If you want to comment, you just click into the video and you can actually ask a question. We post some of the comments up on screen if you're commenting on YouTube or through Periscope. If you are on Twitter, just click on the video stream and it'll take you through to Periscope where you can actually comment there. And of course, you can just tweet on the hashtag. Thanks to Kate Jones, who continues to run our English account today. An amazing Teach Me Icons ambassador stepping in to do that for us today. I'm loving the speakers so far. Just to butt in really before I pass on is just to say how amazing it's been to have so many people apply to speak, incredible Teach Me speakers. Also, the keynotes we have today, everyone knows it's just an incredible lineup of educators. So I'm going to pass over to Lizzie now, who can introduce the afternoon sessions.
Brilliant. I am really excited to announce our next keynote speaker, Becky Wood. Here she appears with another lovely bookshelf behind her. So thank you very much, us English teachers with our books. I have followed Becky for a very long time, and you might have known her as her moniker on Twitter as Shady Lady 222, where she inspires us all on a very regular basis with her thoughts, opinions, and ideas around the classroom. So I'm very excited to hear what you have to say today, Becky, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm going to just do the whole sharing thing, that really awkward thing.
Yeah.
Entire screen.
Hopefully. We've only had nearly a year of lockdown for us all to master this. We've not done it well. It makes us worry about teaching our students if we can't teach ourselves things sometimes.
No. I'm going to be the one, aren't I, that can't do this now. Ooh. Your entire screen. It won't let me do it.
Ooh.
Maybe try an application, Becky, if it's on PowerPoint, just try sharing the Chrome window. Try that.
I'll have to hang on. Right, talk amongst yourselves while I work this out.
Oh, well, we can do that. We can do that all day long.
Okay, it's all greyed out, so it won't let me do it. So let me just upload it here, and we'll go from there.
Perfect.
Okay. If you want to re-enter, then if there's a problem, then just re-enter. It's fine if you need to do that.
I don't think why it's not letting me do it, but anyway. So anyone else, if you might want to save it now online.
No problem. Yeah, so basically, just to talk about the schedule for this afternoon, obviously we're here with Becky, and then after Becky, we've got a whole nother set of Teach Me presentations. They're 10 minutes long each. We have our usual time limits on them. And then at the end of that, we've then got a keynote from Freya Odell. Freya is a legend of the English teaching world. Everybody loves Freya, and we can't wait to hear her as our final keynote. And then after Freya, to close the entire afternoon of stuff, we've actually got 2 poets. So Mark Grist is actually going to come back because I tweeted at him and said, you better return later to do a part 2. So he's going to be coming back at the very end.
And that's hot off the press because I didn't know that. So
off the press. So yeah, we've just got a ton of stuff this afternoon to kind of look forward to, and we'll finish probably around 3:30, 4 o'clock, hopefully. And yeah, and also just to remind everybody, we have £30 of Amazon vouchers up for grabs just by literally tweeting a selfie of you watching the event, watching part 2. Kate Jones is going to be picking the winners on that.
We've had some good ones come through. So
we trusted to pick a good selfie. We trusted to pick a good selfie. So she will be picking 3 winners of the £10 Amazon vouchers, plus further winners, because I know Sarah Mullen has donated a goodie bag, if you like. I know that Kate has donated her $3, which I happen to have here as well. So if you want to win those, I know she's going to give all those 3 away to the selfie competition winners as well. So that's, if you want to do that, you just have to tweet on the hashtag TMEnglishicons. Any look, Becky, yet or not?
Nearly there.
Okay, yeah, plug very quickly as well, because I will be talking about it later, is Tom has mentioned that we're looking for people to come and join the team. Currently, the TM English Icons team is little old me and me on my lonesome, and I would really appreciate some of your wonderful brains to help this continue moving. So at the end of the session, we will be, I will be tweeting, TM Icons will be tweeting, and I'm sure Tom will put this up at the bottom, a link to sign up if you'd like to get involved. You know, it might just be that you've never done anything like this before and you want to kind of network further with other English teachers. You might be really good at communicating with people to find some speakers, really good at communicating with our sponsors to help, you know, make sure we've got some fantastic sponsors and we want to continue that. We're also looking at potentially running a TM Icons, English Icons book club. So I think as English teachers, we're very bad at neglecting our own pleasure for reading, or reading for pleasure, because we've not always got the most time. So if we can force ourselves.
Although Becky does, she's got about 1,500 books behind her, so she definitely has the time to read. Huge.
Exactly. We've got all the books, finding the time to read them. So we are also looking at starting up a book club from TM English Icons as well. So we're looking for some team to help with that. And would you look at this? We've managed to find your presentation. Way!
Yes, it was happened to me. I'll be honest. So hang on. Right, file. Right, how do I show this? I'll present.
Top right hand corner, yeah.
Got it.
Brilliant. Tom and I will disappear now, and the floor, as I said earlier, is all yours, Becky. Thank you so much.
Lovely. Okay, so I'm here to talk to you about tackling disadvantage in the English classroom. Obviously, that's something that we know as teachers has always existed, but it's become something that obviously the media is picking up on a lot more at the moment. And it's this huge, great, big thing that we need to always be thinking about and talking about. But obviously, at the moment, we have many issues around disadvantage. So, okay, bit about me. Hang on, that we're going really well, aren't we? Okay, so a little bit about me. I have moved over lockdown from a place called Peterborough that no one ever knows where it is, to Rochdale, which is in Greater Manchester. My background, I am not from a disadvantaged background. I'm very lucky that I'm from quite a middle class background, in that I had these experiences that some of our students don't have. My dad was a head teacher, my mum was a Senko, family were things like teachers, journalists, advertising. So I had a lot of cultural capital that maybe some of our students don't have. But my dad worked in what was, at one point, the second most disadvantaged area in the country. And he used to make me very aware that life wasn't the same as it was for me, for lots of our young people. When I was 16, after my GCSEs, when you were allowed to do this, I went into my dad's school and worked for a little while with some of the students. And it kind of opened my eyes a little bit. Life isn't the same for everybody, and there are some real barriers for some people. So when I went into teaching, it was something that it bothered me. And, you know, it wasn't this kind of saviour complex where I think, oh, I can save all these children. It was more of sort of an idea that actually this is where you can make the most difference. This is where education is really quite important with some of our most disadvantaged students. So I moved from Peterborough, which is about 40% of children in poverty. If you look on the Child Poverty Action Group website, you can go to your little area of the country and you can see what percentage of children live in poverty. Rochdale is about 45%. I think all of us are going to find in the next few years, are we not, that actually that does go up quite a bit wherever we are in the country. So there's already been little bits of research to look at the impact of the school closures on the attainment gap. We've got, certainly where I am in Rochdale, so between September and December, obviously when schools reopened, we weren't quite down on our levels of coronavirus. So therefore, within a week of us being back, we had cases. So you can see that from September to December, we've got that added gap, that our attendance in Rochdale was about 70%. So some of my students I've only actually taught for face-to-face for about 6 weeks. So they had about 6 weeks out in isolation periods, and then about 6 weeks in school. So we've got that added extra gap there as well. What can it look like then within our classrooms? Well, I'm going to go very quickly through each of these today. I apologise for talking really fast. I want to be able to give you as many ideas, strategies, examples of it working as I can. So, low aspirations, lacking in cultural capital, limited vocabulary. We've talked about vocabulary, other people have talked about vocabulary today, which affects both your reading and your writing. Lack of understanding of the skills required to be a good writer. And students that struggle with the required knowledge for 100% exam spec. So we're going to start with low aspirations. Wonderful Jennifer Webb. If you haven't read this book, you really should. Jenny comes from a very disadvantaged background and has made, you know, she's this wonderful human being. So really do have a read of this book. And she said that disadvantaged students don't want you to make things accessible. We want you to make aspiration possible. Don't take it slowly or limit what you teach so that we get it. Instead, and I love this bit, be even more demanding, even more ambitious, and help us to catch up with our more privileged counterparts. So it's really, really important that we have this constant ambition for some of our most disadvantaged students. They don't want us to go, oh, well, you know, maybe you won't get it. They want us to be pushing them harder. And I think that's what's really, really important, is that we have this sense of, I expect no less of you. And we're all very good at going, yeah, I think that, yeah, I'm always thinking that. And actually, sometimes I think we have to look within ourselves and think, do we really think that? Are we really making sure that we have these constant high expectations? The next thing that we're going to look at is this idea of cultural capital. I'm going to give you a minute just to have a look at what Jenny says about cultural capital or cultural poverty. So basically, it's this idea, isn't it, cultural capital, that there are things within a society that we need to know, and things that knowledge and that we need to possess, because actually that's the key to unlocking everything else. And that if we don't have that, then we are going to struggle to be able to access the kind of things that are going to make us be successful in the future. Now, E.D. Hirsch talks about this as well. If you haven't read E.D. Hirsch, do, because it's one of those people that you read and you think, yeah, you're right. And I know what you're talking about. And he talked about the fact that each society is a set of information or knowledge that makes up its identity. So not having that knowledge puts students at a disadvantage, as they can't really fully understand the meaning of things. So there are things that we can do within our English department to make sure that our most disadvantaged students are still able to access everything that everyone else can. And it's not always disadvantaged students. I think one of the things that we need to think about is all these strategies I'm going to show you and all the examples I'm going to show you don't necessarily they're not just going to work for our disadvantaged students, they're going to work for everybody. It's just that we're building it in so that those at a disadvantage are able to succeed as well. So there's things like thinking about the essential cultural capital for our own cohort. What can we teach explicitly? What is our own cohort missing? And actually, my eyes have been opened a little bit, moving from Peterborough to Rochdale. So from south to north, that can look very different in a particular cohort. Poverty itself can look very different. You know, disadvantage looks very different. So really, you've got to decide on what's the essential things that you need to teach. And I'll show you some examples in a minute. Obviously, in English, we've got things like theatre trips that can provide experiences that students might not otherwise have. I always used to, at my old school, not been able to do it yet at my new school, but at my old school, you know, I used to fight for the pupil premium money to take some students out to the theatre. And actually, it was an experience that they'd never had. I took some students to see Blood Brothers, and they'd never been to the theatre, and they just stared the whole time through. And at the end, this old couple came up to me and they said, there's all these schools here, they're the best behaved students here. And it was because they were just amazed by what they were seeing. What's really important as well is that we never make them feel less for their lack of knowledge and experience. So if they say, Miss, what's that? I don't understand what that is. You don't make them feel any less for it. You say, okay, well, this is what it is. And I've got an example in a minute of that as well. So these are the kind of things that I've come across, you've probably come across similar, that students might be lacking. So straw. I taught an entire lesson once for mice and men. Nearly got to the end of the lesson. We were talking about Crooks in his barn and the fact that he slept on a bed of straw. So the whole thing was about, you know, how badly he was treated, and so I wanted them to be thinking about the straw. One student puts their hand up and says, Miss, what straw? And then I looked at the whole class and said, does anyone know what straw is? Not one student knew what straw was. So I hadn't thought beforehand that perhaps they wouldn't understand what straw was. They were inner city children. They'd never been, the majority of them never been to the countryside at all. So they didn't understand what straw was. So that was some kind of essential knowledge that I needed to give them. And again, not saying, what do you know? You don't understand what straw is. Okay, I'll just explain what straw is. No, at no point am I judging them for the fact that they don't understand that. Winter Swans. Done that poem a few times, and students say, what are swans? So we have to talk a little bit of background about swans first. Christmas. You might find this sometimes when you have EAL students, they know what Christmas is, but they don't necessarily understand everything that goes on at Christmas. The famous Osprey paper that some of you may remember from a few years ago, it's an IGCSE paper, and it was all about an osprey across the country, and Twitter was really funny that day. There were students tweeting, what the hell is an osprey? They didn't know what ospreys were. Things like describing a day at the beach. If students have never been to the beach, up here, the beach that they would have gone to is Blackpool Beach. If they've never been to a beach and they've never heard the sea, or they've never smelled the smells, it's very difficult for them to be able to access that. And I put the last one in because that is the Pennines. So this is something I found really interesting. My students in Peterborough, Fenland, never seen a hill. A hump, never a hill. Students in Rochdale, yeah, that's my hills. So I always look at them and go, oh, the hills look beautiful today. And they say, they're just hills, miss. So they're very used to hills, whereas elsewhere in the country, they wouldn't know what it was like to see a hill. So that's some very basic things that we need to be thinking about when we teach. So what can we do about that? Well, we need to consider what cultural capital we can actually teach within our group before GCSE, because quite often they need some of this to be able to access the GCSE text. So what's that look like? So for example, at my old school, we looked at biblical allusions because we thought they don't understand what biblical allusions are, and that stops them from being able to unlock some text. We taught them all the Greek stories as well. So for example, if you teach them the story of Achilles, they understand what Achilles' heel means, etc., etc. And we looked at and broke down everything that we might not need to include for our cohort before they got to GCSE. Now, we can't teach everything. So we need to focus on what might be relevant later, perhaps what will help students to unlock text, etc. And we plan within our schemes to revisit key elements. So we taught them, for example, I know Mary was talking earlier about rhetoric. We taught them the fundamentals of rhetoric in year 7, and then that was repeated each year, adding a little bit extra each year. Okay. This is something, now I've moved to this amazing school. Now half of our, well, over 50% of our students are pupil premium, so disadvantaged students. And they're constantly looking at what they can do better. Now, this is something that we do at my school that I think that you might find useful in yours. We have progress indicators. Now, progress indicators were brought in because we wanted to make sure that students always understood the process, that they understood what was going to get them to make progress. So, for example, we might share progress indicators and we talk about them. We say, right now you're going to be learning this, then you'll be learning this, and by the end you'll be able to do this. So it might be across a whole lesson, or this one, for example, is, I don't know why it's not letting that show up, but that would say today. So today we're going to be looking at skimming and scanning, but by the end you'll be able to do this. Same, here's one here for, this was rhetoric with a year 11 class. So I've made it clear to them that we're going to start by looking at the rhetorical appeals. Then in another lesson, you'll be able to understand the methods within those rhetorical appeals. And then by the end of it, you'll be able to form and express your own opinion. So it ultimately makes students feel like they're achieving. It makes them feel like the progress is visible. They understand where they're going. Used it in a similar way for remote learning. So as well as the progress indicators that they have every lesson anyway, and that carries on in remote learning, they might be given, so this was given at the beginning of a week to a year 10 class. So you're going to start by attending the live lesson. We'll introduce the inquiry question, and then it explains that by the end, they'll have written their own narrative and submit it. And they really like this, actually. When I've asked for student feedback, they like knowing where they're going. The other thing, and this, unfortunately, on Google has lost its formatting, but never mind. So we start with the why. So we explain to them at the beginning of every unit why we are doing it. So these are the reasons that I might give for, this was a year 7 childhood experience. Why are we doing this? Well, how's it going to help us later in life, etc., etc. I'll share all this later so you can see it properly. Again, sort of language paper 2, things like why is it important to be able to form an opinion? We talk about, and we might spend an entire lesson doing this, we talk about, okay, so how is this going to help me in the future? How might it help me in another of my school subjects? And we talk about why we're doing it. We give them a blank sheet, and then when we've talked to them about why are we doing this, they then fill it in themselves with their ideas about what they understand about why they're doing that topic, why they're doing that. And it does stop that constant, oh, why are we doing this? Because they understand why they're doing this, and they have had a little bit of discussion and input into why they're doing it. Vocabulary. Now, this has been talked about quite a bit today. And so I'm just literally going to flick through it and just hopefully give you a couple more strategies that you might be able to use. These 2 books, if you haven't already read them, amazing books. And the Beck one in particular is very good at talking about that idea of the tiered words hierarchy. And Alex Quigley is amazing and has blogged a lot. So have a read of those if you haven't already and you're interested in vocabulary. Basically, when we're thinking about vocabulary, it's this idea that I personally think too often students don't write very well or don't write at all because they haven't actually got the tools to express themselves. And that comes with having the words to be able to do it. And a few years ago, good few years ago now, I went through a really severe period of depression. Now, if any of you have ever had bouts of depression, one of the things that often goes is your vocabulary. And I lost my ability to be able to say what I wanted to say. My daughter used to finish off my sentences because she knew what I was going to say. But it taught me, actually, and I remember thinking this was what it must be like to not have the vocabulary to be able to express yourself. And I think that does happen a lot with some of our students, that they know what they want to say, but they don't really know how to say it. So it's giving them the tools to be able to do that. Etymology is amazing. Arlene Holmes Henderson is on Twitter. She goes into schools and often when students know where words come from, it helps them with lots of other different words. Bedrock vocabulary, both of the schools that I worked at use it. A lot of people think, oh, well, you know, sort of EAL. But actually, quite often it's the white British that have that very limited vocabulary. And it's a really good way of helping them to improve that. So I wanted to show you how I had taught vocabulary before, and it worked in action, basically. So just like Hannah was talking about earlier, about not giving them a dictionary and saying, what does the word mean? Look up what the word means, write it down. Or even glossaries. We made our own glossaries. This was a class I had a few years ago, and they were doing it mice and men, you can probably tell from the words. And they really liked the story, and they could tell me stuff about the characters, but they couldn't actually really express it in a very academic way. So I did a year-long project with them, and I taught them vocabulary explicitly. So they would have these, we talk about the words, and then they would write their own definition of the words. I've done lots of other things since that I would improve on, but this was kind of the original research project. So they would learn them, they would write them down. Here are some examples of their work. So this one on the left. The top one is what they wrote originally. So I asked them to write me something about Curly's wife. Curly's wife is not dangerous because I think she's the only lady in the ranch and she just needs some friends and people to talk to. Also, her friends don't pay much attention with her. They write in very much how they talk. Now, I asked them to rewrite it after they had learned the vocabulary. So, and it still isn't perfect, but listen to how much better it sounds. So Curly's wife is misunderstood because everyone thinks she's flirtatious. But she's only flirtatious because she feels despair and mistrusted because no one really talks to her because of this. She's a pretty girl, and that's why the men on the ranch might think that she is feminine and self-obsessed. So hopefully that shows you just how much of a difference knowing the words or having the vocabulary to express yourself can make. There are lots and lots of ways. I stole this resource from Stuart Pike. Dual coding. I think a couple of people might mention dual coding before, but the idea about drawing a picture that represents the word, being able to answer it, to use it. Using the vocabulary check, which is very similar to what Hannah was talking about. This idea of you reading the word, you understand the word, you transform it. You debate it, you use it, you link it. Making them, I'm not afraid of words. So this is a really difficult article, but okay, you're looking at it and you're really scared. What words can you take out of it? How can we read around and get some understanding of what the text is about? This is a resource that we use at my new school. So we might warm up today's words. So we match the word to an image. So summing up very quickly, vocabulary. Do we allow students to guess too much? For example, find synonyms in a thesaurus. Pre-teaching vocabulary, and that's something Stuart was talking about, allowing students to access the text and gain a better understanding of vocabulary and context. Dual coding, allowing students to think carefully about the meaning of words, and teach students not to be too scared of not knowing the vocabulary. Writing skills. I'm going through these very quickly. I do apologise. I am on Twitter if you want to ask me anything at all. This is from How to Teach English by Chris Curtis. And he talks about, unlike speaking, writing is not a natural process. We pick up spoken language through our experience, but actually we kind of need to be taught how to write. And he uses some fabulous examples in his book. There's 3 very, very good books here that you should be reading if you want to teach writing, because they're amazing. Teach Like a Writer by Jennifer Webb. How to Teach English by Chris Curtis. Now, Lindsay Skinner's book, Crafting Brilliant Sentences, it's I think like £100, but get your department to buy it because it's full of resources. You have access to all the PowerPoints, all the resources. So something that I've done in both of the schools that I've worked at is, because students, particularly those from a disadvantaged background, may not be reading a lot all the time, may not be surrounded by different types of writing, is to teach them the little fundamentals of writing. So we look, for example, at different types of narrative structures that they could be writing in. These were from Chris's book. They're paragraph structures, so no, 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 but there was. Sound 1, sound 2, sound 3, reveal, close, closer, closest. And from Lindsay's book, There's lots of different lessons on, you know, considering verb choice when you're writing character, verbs to create personification, etc. This is what it looks like in action. So these are actual students' work. What it does is it gives them a bit of confidence. And once they've got that confidence, they start to be quite imaginative. So this one, this student was targeted a 3, if I remember rightly. Close to me was the body of Leo rolling around on the floor, crying out in pain. Closer to me was the knife in my hand dripping in blood. Closest to me was the dull ache of betrayal touching my heart. Starting to be really, really imaginative in their thinking, but they've got that paragraph structure to fall back on. Same here, no life visited his room, no breeze came through the dull curtains covering the windows, no light touched the wallpaper, blah, blah, blah. But he will always be known as the person who never gave up. Okay. Verb choice when writing character. So we did a lesson on how you can create your verb choices to make them sound like animals. The guards were hunting for me, scratching on the walls and floor, looking for anything strange. They were barking orders at each other, being what they are known for, territorial. So thinking really, really carefully about the verb choices that they use. Again, there's loads more here, so I will share this for you to have a look at. These are some that were done in this lockdown. So they were given that picture of stimulus and they'd learnt the paragraph structure, and then I said, off you go. And these were some of the ones that they came up with. I'll give you a second to have a look at those. So you can see that actually we worry about giving them something that they need to work to and then losing imagination, but actually they don't. We've got a no one there. It supports some of the kind of weaker end as well. I want you to use 3 verbs in your sentence. They splashed happily amongst themselves, giggling, squealing, forgetting. Quite beautiful, actually, that last verb. He looked after his children, remembering, smiling, thinking. It's just getting them to use different sentence structures, but not lose that sense of imagination. Another thing we can do, I think we quite often will say things like, can you go and write me a story? Well, actually, they're like, well, that's right. When we give them something and say, look at this, isn't it written really well? Like the Lovely Bones, where it's written from the murdered girl's perspective. And then transform that. So Porphyria's lover, write a description of events from the point of view of Porphyria and Porphyria's lover. Just giving them a different viewpoint, but we're going to copy that style, and it's okay to steal people's style. In fact, in a language A-level or language and literature A-level, you do that. You steal other people's style and you have to write in that style. And last thing, I don't know how much time I've got, but I'm going to be really quick. Knowledge. So we all know about the forgetting curve. And we all know that students might write very little because they actually don't have the knowledge to feel confident in what they're writing about. Students have many subjects to learn. We sometimes forget that, I think, that they are learning in every subject, and every subject wants them to retain lots of different information. And the best way to do that is through constant spaced repetition. Students as well perhaps don't understand or don't realise what knowledge they are missing, and it's down to us to sort of pick that out. Those 2 books, Kate Jones's Retrieval Practice, first one and second one, amazing books, so much in there. Have a look at those if you haven't already. So what kind of things can we do for retrieval practice? So my previous school, we had big questions. So that's why you've got your big question at the start. What becomes of Tonga? And they would have 5 questions, which were retrieval questions. And the last one, I quite liked doing something like, how did John Watson and Romeo Montague's behaviour concerning love compare? Because it's getting them to think about the character and how they would react in certain ways. Knowledge quizzes. Sure you've seen these on Twitter. Matt Lynch uses a lot of these. Fabulous. My school uses something called stickability to show them what knowledge is important, and therefore they will know what's missing. So at the bottom here, you'll see the triangle. Now the triangle, they use in their books. So they know when they see the triangle, it's something that they've got to remember. So in the margin of the book, they'd write a blue triangle to remind them that this is something that's really important that they need to remember. Essential knowledge. I have this wonderful colleague, Manal, big shout out to Manal, who has taken Kate Jones's book and does a lot of different retrieval starters. We have what's called a lesson launch at my school. So every lesson has a lesson launch. The students know when they see that logo, which was designed by a student, that that's a task that they're just getting on with, and it's a retrieval task. So they always know that whatever task they do at the beginning of the lesson is a retrieval task. So this one's thinking and linking. So how can we link together these themes, these ideas? Retrieval grids. Year 9 have been looking at Night by Eli Wiesel, and this is retrieving what they've already learned. Recall, again, this hasn't formatted very well on Google, never mind. Find and fix your mistakes. Use the space below to tell us what you've learned so far about the novel, etc. Again, Google has killed me this time, never mind. So last lesson, you've got hand there, you should have hand, and on each finger you list the method used to create a Gothic atmosphere, vocabulary. Click through these. Last lesson, 2 lessons ago, might be last term. Linking again, so we've been looking at dystopia, link them with the vocabulary. And pick a task to complete. And all of these kinds of things are in Kate Jones's book, which is absolutely amazing. So that's a real whistle-stop tour through things that might help students that have got disadvantage in various different things like vocabulary, writing skills, etc. Just little things that might help. And I'm happy to talk at any time, because I love this, on Twitter about any of this. But I will share this PowerPoint so you can have a look for yourself.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Becky. That was fantastic. I think when you talked about the fact right at the beginning, you know, this idea that we're going to be facing more disadvantage to come. And I'm in a very different setting from you. I'm all the way down in the south. I'm in Somerset, but I'm seeing coastal deprivation. And there was a GCSE HRA paper a few years back where I remember the quotation. He rode the waves like the bronzed god Poseidon. And all the kids saw the word Poseidon and freaked out. And they're less than a mile from the sea and they didn't know who he was. So it jumps on you, you know, when you don't realise it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, very well.
Addressing it, but also some really key takeaways that we can all use in our classroom so simply and so easily from next Monday onwards. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Brilliant stuff. Okay, we're now going to crack on straight away with our Teach Me element. So Tom is being bad cop again. So you'll see the ticker tape that will go along the bottom, and then myself and him will suddenly appear in the corner as it's coming up to your time. So Dr. Amy Smith is joining us first, and I'm excited about this because we're going to get Stage 5 flavour into it, which is exciting. Yeah. So if you want to pull up your PowerPoint for me, please, Amy.
Yeah, I'm just trying to work out how to do that. Clicked on share screen. It's not really letting me. Oh, hang on. It's going to work. I did a school a little while ago, which was about teaching using technology. And unfortunately, my screen sharing didn't work for that. Ironic. Yeah, okay, can you see that okay?
We can see that fine. So yeah, it's all up and running. So brilliant. You're ready to go. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. I'd like you to picture the scene. So we've got a class of 22 A-level English literature students sitting in a cold, damp classroom in Northern Ireland in the mid-2000s. At the front of the classroom, there's a chalkboard. There's an overhead projector, which is, of course, cutting-edge technology, with a pull-down screen. And once a half-term, if we're lucky, there's a TV on a trolley on which we watch the BBC adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. But what is really imprinted on my mind from these lessons is the passion and the extensive knowledge of my teacher, as is the dreamy way she would gaze out of the window when she was talking about John Keats. It was clear to me that she didn't see a concrete path and a set of rusty iron railings when she looked out of the window. Instead, she could see a nightingale pausing in a moonlit glade. So I realise I'm at serious risk of over-romanticising here. But what really sticks with me, and the point that I want to make today, is her belief in literature as an art form and a gateway to a greater appreciation of human existence. And that the academic exploration and discussion of text is also a form of art. And the other thing that I learned in these lessons is that discussing text is a joyful experience as well. I know lots of people are of the opinion that analysing a text and writing essays will kill the text, but I would argue that meaningful academic discussion done in the spirit of true enjoyment is incredibly important for A-level teaching. Mary Myatt, who's been mentioned a few times today, recently borrowed Marie Kondo's question in a podcast, does it spark joy? And I think that's really central to our curriculum planning for A-level. Yet, for many students starting out at sixth form today, English literature A-level is very little to do with art, and a lot to do with achieving a particular grade to access the university or to progress onto the career of their choice. And many of the students I teach have chosen to take English because, and I quote, it's okay, and they achieved the required grade 6 at GCSE. So I was worried that I was alone in this, and therefore I recently asked Team English on Twitter what they thought the main challenges of teaching this subject at A-level were. So these are their responses, and I'll just give you a second to read through. And right at the top of the list is the need to teach our students academic reading and writing knowledge. And Jennifer Webb writes about this and links it with the idea of cultural poverty. And of course, that links in with the talk that we've just heard. And I think what's really important here is that we need to give our students the key to unlock all of this knowledge, all of these skills that they need to have. So I'll just give you a second to read what Jennifer Webb has to say. And I'm sure that, like many of us here today, these words really resonate with me. So the school I currently teach at has a huge disparity in terms of students' cultural capital, including those who are progressing onto the A-level course. And so my question that I've been trying to solve this year is, how do we explicitly teach the academic skills that they need whilst retaining our belief that the act of interpretation is a joyful art form? So what I've done over the last few months is distill everything that I've read about and that I've practiced with, that I've experimented with, into a resource, and I'll share this online via my Twitter page along with the lessons that I've created to go along with this. And as I've been doing this, I've been really relying on these sources here. So of course, Jennifer Webb's books, Neil Bowen's The Art of Writing English Literature Essays, the A-level version is absolutely phenomenal. Cadextrus's blog, I'm sure many of you know, and The Writing Revolution that we've already heard about today. So over the next few minutes, I'm just going to introduce my resource and make a few suggestions about how it can be used in the classroom. And as I say, it can be downloaded from my Twitter profile, and you can DM me if you've got any questions about that. So this is the first slide, and it could be used as a knowledge organizer or a bookmark for students to refer back to. And it starts with that sentence level work that we've heard about quite a few times today already, and moves up to exploring the arc of the essay. And I'm indebted to Jennifer Webb for that particular technique. So as I've been teaching this, I've really been dwelling on another phrase that Mary Myatt has used, which is fewer things in greater depth. And so I've been teaching this knowledge really slowly recently at that granular level, ensuring students are getting it right and can use it fluently before we build up to essay writing. And I think that giving them that solid foundation will help them to understand how it really is an art form. So just zooming in on this section here, the sentence stem section, which people have spoken about already today, if I was teaching this, I would start by explaining why. And we want to improve the fluency of our academic writing and create a personal voice, which is, of course, essential to assessment objective 1 on the A-level course. Then I'd look at how to modeling sentence stems in isolation. So we'd look at individual sentences in relation to a small chunk of text that students already know really well. And I think that's really key here. I don't want students' cognitive load to be taken up by processing the text itself or the vocabulary around it at this point. I want them to know all of that and to be able to focus on crafting their writing. Then, of course, I'd review the student work, we'd do some whole class feedback, some more modelling, building up to a paragraph. And all the time, emphasising for students that they need to adapt their sentence stems and their verbs to the context of the paragraph. So this resource is not supposed to be a tick list or something that they have to include in every paragraph, but something that they can adapt and use to create their own personal voice. And then, of course, we do some more practice and consolidation. And I think as a profession, we're really good at teaching academic writing. And maybe what we're a little bit less confident at is teaching academic reading. And so I turned back to Twitter to do a bit more research on this. And I put out the question, what exactly do you do when you're doing academic reading? How do you know what to write down when you're taking notes? And here I've got the image of a student in my mind who's sitting at the back of the classroom. Everyone is assiduously taking notes as we're watching a video, as we're discussing something. And he's looking around and thinking, how do they know what to write down? How do they sift through all of this information and work out what's important? So I asked people this, and a lot of people responded with the phrase gut instinct, which I thought was really interesting, because surely an instinct is a bank of knowledge that we've worked out and built up over time, and we've turned it into a habit. So what is that knowledge exactly? And I looked back through all of the notes that I've taken in my study. So back to my A-level notes, and there's just reams and reams and reams of paper with not very useful bullet points written on there, because I've just written down everything that my very inspirational teacher said. And it's not useful, it's not precise. But when I look at my PhD notes, they're precise, they're focused. I'm using a shorthand to do that. So what I did was I really interrogated my own processes of academic reading and then compared that with what other people do and came up with this particular resource. And we'll just zoom into the first section here. So initially, I think students need to really focus on the big question. And of course, we know that concepts really drive the A-level course, and we want them to focus on those underpinning ideas of the texts. So they identify their big question for the coursework, for example, that might be their coursework title. And then as they read, they need to look for evidence and ideas to support, challenge, and underpin their response to that question. And of course, in the classroom, we would look at what those verbs mean, we'd unpick it, I'd model it, we'd look at a range of student examples maybe and rank those examples from the most to the least successful. Then I would get them to draw the Cornell note-taking sheet that so many of us use, and I'd make sure they write the author's full name, the titles, the publication information at the top of the page. Anyone who knows me knows that I love a bibliography. If you ever look at my PhD thesis, the bibliography is the best section of it. And I think that by training students to think about referencing quite early on, it's going to make that process of referencing their coursework essays much easier later on. And as well as that, because we're welcoming them into an academic discussion as literary critics, you know, helping them to understand the conventions that they're taking part in and that they're using can be really helpful. So then after that, when students are note-taking, I would make sure they look at a summary of the critic's overall argument. Again, we're thinking about concepts and big ideas here. So I want students to read the whole essay and to get the gist of it and to summarize it in just 1 or 2 sentences. It's really easy to get bogged down in the precise detail of a critical essay, you know, their particular argument about a particular word. I'm thinking here of Othello. There's a debate about Act 5 of Othello, whether Shakespeare meant to write base Judean or base Indian. And, you know, looking at those specifics can be really fascinating, but actually what's important is the overall argument. So they need to summarize that. Then after that, of course, they need to look at keywords, new information, new vocabulary, juicy phrases, and so on, and jot all of those down in their notes. And of course, avoid writing down information they already know, long detailed explanations, and so on. And I hope by doing this, we help move our students towards autonomy and ownership of their own learning. But also, when they have that strong foundation, then they can really understand that academic discussion, essay writing, is this joyful form of art. So as I said, I'll be sharing this all on Twitter, on my Twitter account, and obviously just get in touch with me if you have any questions. So thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Amy. I love that idea of, does it spark joy? Because actually that's what we're all here for. That's why we all became English teachers.
Exactly.
Because it sparks joy with us. So we need to be able to pass that on. So thank you very much. Fab.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Matthew Hallam. Brilliant. Hi, Matthew. Another great bookshelf. It's going to be clearly a key thing.
Take credit for this one. This is my school one. So.
Oh, I'm sure it's good on a Saturday.
That's showing off that, isn't it? If you've gone there, it's not for that, Matt. Show that off.
Say that again, Tom.
I said, have you gone there specifically to show that bookshelf off?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good. 100%. That's all I said. I'm going now.
Brilliant. Do you want to try and bring your PowerPoint up if you're using one? Matt?
Yeah.
Check if you're running. That is one way of getting around Wi-Fi problems, though, going into school.
That was my real reason. Yep.
Yes.
Should be there.
Sometimes there's a slight lag. Yep, it's coming up now. Brilliant. You're all good to go. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Hallam. At the bottom there's my Twitter handle if you want to ask any questions or want to follow, etc. So I'm doing something a little bit different. I know that I'm kind of talking to the converted because you are all English experts. And I know that sometimes literacy coordinators are not actually within the English department. So by all means, please do share this with whoever is your literacy coordinator at your school. I've kind of put this together as a bit of help and advice for people that are just starting out on their whole school literacy strategy, really. But obviously there's other things that if people want to talk to me about and Magpie, then feel free. So a few things that I've learned and priorities about establishing a whole school literacy strategy. Really, the first one is a bit of a plea to any SLT out there. And it's really from my experience that if we, as literacy coordinators and leaders, don't put the full time and funding into support for it to be a whole school strategy, then it's just not going to have the maximum impact. So the ideal here would really be that SLT would make literacy a whole school priority. That's definitely something that I'm forever grateful that my head and SLT in our school have done that. The next point is something else that we've done by making literacy as part of the whole staff appraisal process, which just helps to add that accountability. It means that all teaching staff in the school are all focusing on literacy as a priority. As I've mentioned already, SLT making time and adequate funding available to develop key areas of literacy across the whole school, and importantly over time as well. It really makes me want to cry when I hear literacy coordinators who I work with coming to me and saying, oh, my SLT want me to show evidence of impact when we've had 6 weeks of an intervention and they want reading ages to have caught up. It's things, that realization that literacy is a long haul thing. There are short-term wins you can put in, but it is a long-term project. And we very much work in my school with working with Key Stage 3, getting Key Stage 3 right, which I know sounds a bit corny to then say, but if we get Key Stage 3 right, then Key Stage 4, I believe anyway, will look after itself. So the next point is that before any changes are made to policy, I think staff really need to see the benefit of literacy from their own curriculum areas and have a shared goal. And the idea is that staff acknowledge that literacy isn't just an English thing and that we owe it to all our students to be teachers of literacy. And also as part of this, that staff acknowledge that even if their curriculum area, GCSE, does not award marks for literacy, which, let's face it, that's quite a rarity now, but there are still some subjects out there, they still need to share this common goal. And for us here, the common goal that we want to have throughout our school is the following. It's the passion for the subject I teach should make students want to become the future scholars of my subject. And therefore, I must prepare them for when they will need to write like a mathematician or a scientist or a geographer, etc. And so it's that real sky's the limit thinking on that we're not just preparing. It's been said by some of the great speakers already today. We're not just preparing students for GCSEs here. It's about their future life. We've got the energy and the passion to make them want to follow our subjects and take our subjects further than GCSE, but we need to give them the tools, the skills, and empower them to be able to do that. As part of that change, I think one success that we really had was at a very early age, my SLT allowed me to find the willing and the able staff within each curriculum area, not faculty, because if you speak to obviously RE, geography and history, they might all be humanities, but their curriculum areas are very different. So what I did was I asked for volunteers from each individual subject to be literacy advocates for their department. And by using the wealth of knowledge and expertise that they've got within their subject, it's ensuring that we're coming on to the next point, which is making sure that we are building literacy from within, and as I'm about to say, that it's not just a bolt-on. So moving on to that point, literacy policy as a bolt-on, I've found from working with quite a few schools, it's rarely effective. As part of that, the ideal, I think, should be that any CPD and changes to policy need to be there to help staff improve their curriculum, and they need to see the benefit to their curriculum. And of course, if we are embedding new things, before anything is added, I would always try and look for anything that can be taken away first, anything that isn't being effective that can be removed, because otherwise we just end up with this buckaroo effect. And we all know that if we keep piling it on, eventually we're going to get kicked back and it's not going to be effective. I would say that evidence of impact is really, really key as well. I try and always make sure that any measure of impact is updated regularly. For me and for my school, our main literacy data comes from reading ages. So it's important to me that we have the funding and the availability to test students annually. If I think we're putting reading ages as a measure for literacy and we're only testing them in year 7 and year 9, or we're testing them when they come in at year 7 and not again until year 10, my concern is that how are we going to be able to know who we need to put intervention in with if we've not tested in that time? And that's why I think it's crucially important. I think if I was in a school where I wasn't able to have the funding to do reading age tests, for example, every year, I wouldn't have that as my main marker for evidence. I would look at something else that I know I can use and update regularly. I also try and ensure that any project that we do is national evidence informed. And that's so that I can really answer these 3 questions with data. So was it really X which had the impact? How do you know that they couldn't have achieved it on their own? And I think that's one that is really important, that we are using that national informed practice to look at focus groups, so we can see that it wasn't just a case of luck, and that also the students could not have done this on their own, because we've got another group of students in a focus group who didn't manage to do it. And then when we swapped the groups over, they did the same intervention, and look, they were able to progress. And I find that that's much stronger evidence. Finally, I think this is a really important one for any visitors that we might get. I'm not going to mention their names, but any visitors that come in with smiles on their faces and want to judge the impact of your interventions, outcomes, and your curriculum. How do you know that it's likely to be working even before you've completed the project? And this is something I mentioned earlier, that literacy isn't a quick win, and that it's a long-term measure. Some of the strategies that we have in place here are 2-year strategies. So if someone was to come in after 6 months, I want to be able to say that, well, we haven't got the impact of the end of the project because we're still a year and a half off, but I've got what I can show you so far. And actually, I know it's likely to be working, or it's most likely to be working, because this is what the national evidence says, and it's a model that we've taken that is evidence informed. And so that's just a few pointers that are really important to me as developing a whole school strategy. Essential reading, there's obviously been a lot of speakers have talked today about really influential writers that have produced amazing texts. In particular, when we were doing the whole school strategy, or as part of our literacy strategy, a whole school strategy on vocabulary, Alex Quigley, who's already been mentioned, was really pivotal in that. But in terms of whole strategy, I think that the EEF Improving Literacy in Secondary Schools guidance report is really key to ensuring that the strategy itself really hits the spot in terms of ensuring that the different elements of the research are adhered to within your strategy. For anybody who's not seen it before, it's divided up as it is on the screen, which is really nice because you can look at what the summaries are, you can go into the much deeper research, and then you can apply that to your own strategies. So a few tips regarding that then. I would say do a whole school diagnostic, first of all. We need to know our starting points. And as much as possible, I try and triangulate any data that I can and marry any data up. So that might start off with staff voice, student voice, parent voice, reading ages, writing ages. If your school uses CISRA, so looking at department CISRAs, and looking at how literacy can then, again, help those curriculums from within, and then your progress tracking of how your school monitors progress through the curriculum. One thing that's really kind of helped, I think, in the last few years with our strategy being successful is having a strategy map. The example there of mine is on the screen. It's a double-sided page of A3. You can see across the top there are some colours. They link back to, if I just go back, they pretty much link back to the different areas of the strategy framework. So these then link into the little titles that you can see in different colours, so we can see what we are doing with different areas. Of course, this is just the map for 1 year, so there are parts of those colours that will be missing because we can't do everything in 1 year, and there are some things that I think it's fine to be able to say, we're not doing that at all this year. We're focusing on this and getting this right, whether it's writing strategies, reading. Next year, we're going to focus on oracy. The year after that, we're going to focus on something else. And then I would also say, see what other CPD support is out there. There's some examples along the bottom, but then the final icon is just about networking. If you don't have a network in your area, then contact other schools and network, because we all need the help. That's just an idea of what my kind of the progression looks like. And that has impacted us today. As you can see, we've had an annual rise in reading ages above expectation. We've got a rapid rise in the quantity and quality of disadvantaged extended writing. And we've got a rise in extended writing answers in key subjects on students being above target. Okay. And so just to summarize, those are the final things, really. Can't do everything at once, build a team and ask for help. If you want to get in touch, please feel free.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Matt. Literacy is very much everyone's responsibility. And that National Strategy Framework, I know lots of schools are using it, but it's really fantastic to see how you're using it in action and seeing the evidence that you're gathering as well along the way. So thank you very, very much for sharing that. Thanks. Brilliant. Okay, next up, we have Lindsey Borden. Brilliant. And look at that. Wow, pro, you've got it up and running straight away. No need to no need for me to fill while you've got it running. So fantastic stuff. We're looking at an English curriculum from scratch. So when you're ready, Lindsey, it's over to you.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here on this sunny day, if you're watching it live. I'm Lindsey. I work for the David Ross Education Trust. I've been an English teacher for about 21 years, I think now. I'm talking to you about the work that we're doing at the moment in the Trust to develop a new English curriculum from scratch. And this is something that I've been really nervous about. And it's been coming for a long time. We've known it needed overhauling. We've tweaked it and we've done various things in between. But really, we needed to look at the whole curriculum and kind of take it apart, look at what was working and put it back together again in a way that was better. But that's been quite an intimidating job, really, because I've never really fully felt that I've understood how to properly create a curriculum. And so I'm going to share with you, a bit of the journey that we've been on as a team and some of the things we've discovered and some of the ways we've done things. And really, it's just my reflection, I suppose, on what's worked for us. And it might help you out if you're in the same position and you're thinking, there's a big job to do here, but I don't really know where to start and it's a bit overwhelming. So the first thing I would say is do find your why. And when I'm talking about finding your why, what I mean is, why are you changing the curriculum in the first place? Actually, what's the rationale behind that? because we don't want to be changing things for the sake of changing if it's working. On the other hand, I would argue that a curriculum is never really done anyway. Every time we teach it, we find something we want to improve, something we want to change, something we want to replace, a text or a writer that we've got passion for, or we realise there's a gap in our students' knowledge that we need to fill. So thinking about your why is really important. It's also crucial for onboarding the people who are going to help you develop the curriculum. People sometimes fear change. They might not want to change the curriculum. It might be something they've been teaching for the last 5 years and they're very happy with it. Thank you very much. And also, making a new curriculum is a lot of hard work and you need to put time and effort in. So having the why behind that hard work and that hard thinking and that change is really, really crucial to ensure that everybody's on the same page and that you're pulling together and you're all doing it for the same reason and rationale. Now, for us, there were a few key things because we have got a really well sequenced Key Stage 3 in place, but there were a few things that we wanted to improve about it. So one, we wanted to have a chronological curriculum so that we could build the students' understanding of literature through time. Secondly, we wanted more diversity in the curriculum because we wanted to have more of those marginalised voices or voices that hadn't really been prioritised or weren't really being prioritised in our existing curriculum. We wanted more teacher agency in the curriculum, more involvement from teachers across the trust in what they were teaching and how they were teaching it and the way it was being delivered, the sequencing and the knowledge that they were imparting to their students. We wanted to also, we looked at it as an opportunity to develop staff as well. It's developing me, and that's for sure. And it's developing our heads of department and lead practitioners and our teachers who are going to be involved in creating and resourcing the lessons. Because if you're in a position where you're given resources, that is fantastic. And I am always happy to use other people's resources. But then if you've never had to create your own, there's a bit of a gap potentially there in your skills and knowledge in terms of you as an English teacher. And also, we all probably know that when we get someone else's resources, they're never quite what we need them to be. We always tweak them, we adapt them, and it's important that we develop the thinking process behind those adaptations, and that's what I think getting involved in curriculum design helps to do. We also wanted to add more challenge to our curriculum, and I'm going to come back to that later and talk about what we think we mean by challenge, at least for us. So what's been really important,
Lindsay, sorry, your screen has frozen actually.
Oh.
On the first slide. So we're still actually on the first slide. Sorry, I didn't realize someone's just messaged me to tell me.
Okay.
So do you want to, if you stop sharing and then reshare. Sorry.
How's that?
No.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah?
Yeah, sorry. So we're on slide 2, yeah?
That's what you were missing. We actually want to be on slide 3 now. Can you see collaboration?
Okay. I thought we were like loads of slides in. No, it's okay.
No, you only said find your why. Can you see collaboration?
Okay. So currently we're seeing first things first, find your why. That's what we're seeing on screen now.
What's going on?
Right, we are now. There's just a lag, so you're now on collaboration.
Okay. This always happens to me with IT. I am the jinx, but I hope I'm getting an extra 30 seconds for this.
I'll consider it. I'll consider it.
Okay, that's fair. So, I think it's really important to build in opportunities to collaborate and to make the curriculum with your team, whoever that might be, regardless. And although you might initially think that's going to create more problems than it solves, actually, I would say it's the reverse. Because when you work with a team, it's the old adage, isn't it, that more brains are better than one, and you get all the ideas from your colleagues and your team around you have got different interests. You might have different university specialisms. Maybe they're a linguist and maybe you're an expert in Chaucer. And actually having a depth and a wealth of knowledge to draw on, to share ideas with, to bounce things backwards and forwards has been really invaluable for us. So there's a team of 5 of us at the moment working on just the long-term planning of our new curriculum. And the amount of things that we discuss in so much detail, I mean, we're English teachers, we've always got a lot to say, but it has been amazing CPD for all of us, just seeing the different perspectives and then coming to an agreement, a compromise perhaps, about what we want the curriculum to look like going forward that's going to best suit everybody. And so there's lots of different ways that you can build collaboration. You can see a little list on the screen, hopefully, if we're on the right slide. But I think that having everybody involved as much as they can be is really important for that sense of ownership and agency over the curriculum that you ultimately are going to be teaching and iterating as you develop it and teach it in your schools. This is our mission statement. I don't know if you can see it. I hope you can. I'm going to pause for a minute and let you have a read of that.
No, we can't yet. I think you need to, can you click on present, Lindsay?
Let's
So go from current slide. Present slideshow from current slide on the top.
Okay.
That's the one.
Got it?
Hopefully, soon
I'm
find
going
out.
to have to do this every time I want to move slide. So, this is...
So we still can't see. We're on mission statement now.
Yeah.
So if you, it's maybe there's just a lag. It's not when you're clicking, it's not going through to the next slide. So we are on mission statement now, but just be aware when you go on the next one, there might be a little bit of a delay. Okay. All right.
Typical. This is just so typical, isn't it? You when you think you're going to be presenting to lots of people, you think, oh, you know, it'll be fine. I won't have IT issues, and then this happens every time. So this is our mission statement that we made as a team, and that's all our heads of English, lead practitioners and me. We sat down and we looked at what was really important about creating an English curriculum. What did it mean to us, and what did we want our students to think, to do, to feel, to achieve through that curriculum? And we tried to kind of put it into this statement that encapsulated all of those important things. And yours, if you're doing it, it will probably be completely different, because this has got to be really personal to you, and your school and your students and your priorities. Right. I've clicked. Maybe in about 2 minutes, you might see what I can see. The next thing that we looked at doing when we done our...
I've just Googled to see what the problem is. If you come out of present mode, I think it will probably keep up with us. There we go. Yeah, we can see it changing now. So if you just don't go into present mode, that probably will be the fix.
Okay, thank you. So what we then decided to do was to look at our core components and key concepts. So long story short, what we actually wanted students to learn. And so we broke it down into loads of different headings, kind of almost like the genres of English that we wanted to cover, and the big picture, the kind of thematic links that would go vertically and horizontally through the curriculum. And you can see there that we've got, you know, Shakespeare, we've got the Gothic, we've got dystopian. We thought those were all, for us, the crucial areas that we wanted to ensure were signposted and taught explicitly in the curriculum. And this has been an iterative process, and it still is and will be, because actually we missed some things out and we've added some things in, and we're at the very beginning of this process. So no doubt something else would change in it as well. That's what ours looks like, though, at the moment. The next big job was looking at knowledge, and we basically made a big list. Everything we want students to know and to be able to do in English by the end of Key Stage 3. And then we divided it up into all the different types of knowledge. And even that was a little bit interesting, because the knowledge definitions that people have, you know, what is core knowledge, what is procedural knowledge, or what are threshold concepts, were all slightly different. So we needed to pin that down so we were all talking about the same language. And then we divvied that list up into all those different sort of headings. Some overlapped, some were quite contentious, and we've refined it since its first iteration. It's quite different to how it was even last week. We've added a few bits in. And it's not, you know, like maths and science. We don't have all that kind of substantive knowledge, those sort of hard facts that are always certain throughout the subject. So it did take quite a lot of wrangling for us to come to an agreement about what was going to be the core knowledge that we wanted to teach. So we came up with the big list. We got it all compartmentalized into these different areas, and that's what helped us come up with our sequencing. So this is our, well, one of our first drafts of what we wanted Year 7, or the start of Year 7, to look like. And we've broken it down into its really small component parts. So we started with our core knowledge and our threshold concepts, and we wanted to ensure that we planned to teach them in a really measured way to ensure that they'd been mastered. So everything has been chunked. So we don't expect year 7 just to be able to write an assessment on the Odyssey, an essay on the Odyssey, after they've been studying it for 8 weeks. Because we haven't taught them how to write an essay. And actually the act of writing an essay needs to be broken down into so many smaller, little, tiny areas. And that's what we've mapped really carefully and sequentially through the curriculum, so we can build that knowledge up. Yours will probably look different, but this is what we decided on. We also thought it was really important that we were specific about the vocabulary that we were teaching. That's so that we could draw it out and explicitly instruct students on that, which is one of the recommendations actually that was mentioned in the last presentation about the EEF. And the other thing that we wanted to do was have big questions in our thinking about the planning. So we had an overarching question, a destination for the unit in mind, which isn't necessarily going to be linked to the assessment, but it's helping to guide what we're teaching and when we're teaching. Now, finally, if you are starting this process and you're thinking, you're still a bit overwhelmed, because it is, let's be honest, a big job and a lot of responsibility, and you want to get it right. There's loads and loads of amazing books out there that can really support you with it. So Symbiosis was absolutely brilliant and really helped me get my head around this, as was Mary Myatt's The Curriculum. Trivium was absolutely brilliant for me as well. All of those books are really accessible for anybody to read. Making Meaning in English by David Didow, brilliant, thoroughly recommend it. But if you're more of a kind of watching rather than reading person, then I suggest Kat Howard has done about an hour-long Lit Drive CPD video. I think it was about a year ago now, but it's still free on the Lit Drive area. And it explores all of this in so much more depth than I can do justice to in 10 minutes. And that is it from me.
Thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate it, and for managing all of the horrendous technological issues. So thank you so much. And I think, curriculum planning is all on the forefront of our mind, because the wonderful people with a capital O keep talking about it. But it's so much more than just tick boxing, isn't it? It's about finding what works for us. So thank you so much. Brilliant. Next up, hopefully with minimal technology problems, is Jasmine Lane.
Hi.
Hello, Jasmine, welcome. Do you want to try and pull up your PowerPoint? Fingers crossed it works. We were doing so well this morning. It's that period 4 and 5, feeling, clearly. The technology's had enough. We're all raring to go.
Okay.
Is it coming?
Just while Jasmine's doing that, just to shout Jasmine to say thanks very much for getting up in the morning in the USA to do this, because I know there's a hell of a time gap where you are. So thanks for joining in with us.
Well, it's 9 a.m. and it's Saturday, and
it's 9 a.m. Saturday. That's
Is
what
my
I mean.
screen sharing now?
Not quite. No.
Okay.
Yes, now it is.
There we go. Okay.
Perfect. So it's all up and running. Thank you very much, Jasmine. Over to you.
Okay. So my very short presentation is on a topic that I've been thinking a lot about in my last 3 years. As it says, tackling injustice with the best that has been thought and said. And so when we're thinking about this concept, I kind of want us to get into the frame of, when we're thinking about curriculum, it's not just like the best that has been thought and said. Yeah, it's a really packed sentence with a lot of meaning behind it. And so I think we have to kind of unpack what that means before we can really do any curriculum work. So in that sentence, the best, it is a construct, but it has real implications in the same way that we could say race is just a construct, it doesn't matter, or gender is just a construct, it doesn't matter. It has real implications for people's lives, same as what we decide to teach. And then who decides what counts as best and what we decide to put in as best is also a function of power. From the people that decided that it was the best, from us saying that it has to be said for it to be the best. So in that sentence, it's really important for us to focus our work in that line, but then understanding all of the different layers of it. And so something that comes to mind as we're thinking about curriculum and thinking about, centering it in that, it might be tempting to look at some of the newer books, we might think that the best that has been thought and said, we might think of old dead white guys. And so we need to bring in diversity to our curriculum, right? And there's a lot of like young adult literature that does that. And so these are just some of those titles, but I want to caution us against that. Just because if we choose like the newest, the most like engaging quote unquote text, it communicates a few things. It says that it can say that the groups that we've chosen to bring in for the diversity aspects, nothing they've written before is worth reading, that they've only started to produce work right now, which is false. And then as Lindsey was saying before, it can also do like a tick box nod to diversity. So saying that like, it doesn't really matter if it's quality or not, it's by a Black author or it's by like a BAME author or whatever. That's what matters more than like the quality. And so, that best part, every culture has their best. And so as English teachers, we need to go and, decide and be reading widely to understand which best we're going to pull from. And so in this line, like I've been talking about, like there are codes and a culture of power for English teachers in any profession you're in. There's like gates, basically. Literacy and knowledge are gatekeepers. And as teachers, we're basically deciding whether students will be able to get past that gate and, kind of change things if they want, or if they'll be just kept on the outside. And what we choose for them to read kind of determines that. So that's just our first thing. So I want to pull up a slide of 3 different texts. These are texts from 3 different countries, from 3 different people of different races and different time periods. The first one is from Macbeth. The second is from Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart. And then the last one is from Chinua Achebe. And so on the surface, we might look at these and say like, oh, like they're irrelevant. They don't make any sense together. There's nothing that ties them together. But if we pull out the themes in those, these texts that are the best from these cultures, we see that there are, we can pull out the theme of power and the theme of like madness. You can see, we all know Macbeth, but it's the same thing in Telltale Heart. And then we also see Okonkwo and Things Fall Apart also kind of go down. And so if we want to be able to really investigate those issues, like what happens when, power goes unchecked, or when power is taken away, or when madness descends, bringing those threads through the best and showing how across cultures, across times, these issues have always been talked about, but just in a different way. That's where the power lies. And that's how students are able to actually be able to understand, how power works in society, not just in their specific context. And so in our best that we're deciding, it has to include a few things. So there's something called like critical fictions, which is Bell Hooks coined this term, and it means texts that within themselves, they critique things in society that are an issue. So Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart directly kind of pushes back on the idea that Africa is just like, just a monolith. There's no culture, kind of how it's presented in Heart of Darkness. You could also choose, I think it's in An Inspector Calls, where it like kind of critiques capitalism. That's an example of a critical fiction. It also has to give students the ability to engage with the world. And so their world, it's not just what they experience, but it's also how their lives are situated within what they experience. And then windows, sliding doors, mirrors, we might have heard that phrase. It's not that complicated. And as English teachers, we want to do that anyway. It just means lots of different perspectives. And then the last one is relevance. So when we're choosing the best, relevant doesn't mean like if you live in a poor neighborhood or an impoverished neighborhood that you have to read books about people being poor. It means that you're able to understand and place yourself and understand like how you fit in with that text. It's not about being personal, but it's about how do I make sense in this larger context. And so when we do that, that's how we get to critical thinking. This is another text by Bell Hooks. She says, critical thinking involves discovering the who, what, when, where, and how of things, finding answers to eternal questions, and utilizing that knowledge in a manner that enables you to determine what matters most. And so if we want students to be able to do that, we can't just present one perspective or one narrative, because we're automatically leaving out other people's understandings and their perspectives in how they situate themselves in the world. So here's an example of something that might happen if you're just like, I need to make sure that my kids really, really understand slavery. So every single subject finds like how I can understand slavery. In English, you could study roots, and then history, the constraint of race. In biology, you're learning about like experimentation on enslaved women, like how we got gynecology from that, and just keep going and going and going. And so the issue is that sometimes when we want to tackle injustice, it might seem that we just need to confront the issues head on and just really, really study them in depth. But if you look at this list, this is, it's a sample list that I made up, but it could happen. And it actually is kind of depressing. And this also communicates to students that like, this is all that whatever group you're studying, this is all that they are. This is their history. This is all that they can understand. And like all that your history or whoever's history this is, like all it is pain and slavery and struggle. And that's not the case. And so when we're thinking like the best, these are texts that are the best of these, but it's not just a matter of, looking at the issues and then just hitting the issues over and over and over. So when we think about what goes in to our curriculum for the best that's been thought and said, I keep in mind this quote from Terry Eagleton. He says, "There's no one grand narrative, simply a host of mini narratives, each of which has its partial truth." And so I chose these texts thinking across year groups. You maybe teach The House on Mango Street in year 8, A Raisin in the Sun in year 9, Of Mice and Men, maybe like year 8 again. And then The Great Gatsby could be either in year 11 or at A level. I'm translating our American terms to the British ones. But these texts all get at this issue of like dreaming in America or the American dream and like what that looks like. So The Great Gatsby isn't the only perspective on that. The House on Mango Street, also not the only one. And so what we want to do with the best is show students every person has their way of experiencing this issue, and that it helps them form a more complete picture of what it means to see literature and to see their own understanding. And so knowledge matters, knowledge is power. Lisa Delpit, as I've been talking about, she says, if you're not already a participant in the culture of power, being explicitly told the rules makes acquiring power easier. So we tell students like, hey, we're going to study this text because of this reason. It's a good text, but we need to do it for this reasons. But then also, Zaretta Hammond, like she makes the point that like, we love butterflies and science and all kinds of things. Not everything has to be heavy. Sometimes you can just enjoy a book for its beauty. And that's also part of the best that's been thought and said. There's so much that you can get from it. You don't have to focus on the struggle. You can just focus on its beauty as well and just enjoy it. And so I'd say like to change the bond that exists between law and power, to really get past like to get to working at the injustice with the best that's been thought and said, we kind of have to reframe it for ourselves. Like teaching dominant discourses isn't white supremacy. It's a requirement for accessing cultures of power. And so giving students that frame, what I've found is they really latch onto that and they're able to have a little bit more buy-in. Even if they don't like something, they're like, okay, I need to know this for this reason. And they're able to get something out of it at the very minimum. And so these are kind of just like my big takeaways. Narrative and curricular voices to tackle injustice. Teach the best and tell your framing. Tell them why you're choosing this one over something else. Resist a single story. And this isn't just, like we have like a Black author. If the only Black author you have is one about slavery, consider that, reconsider that. Resist focusing on trauma narratives. Similarly, if the only Black author you have is about someone being shot or about someone like living in like destitute poverty or something like that, reconsider that. And then also just remember that joy is a form of resistance. So allow your students to don't overload them with like the critical theory or, feeling like you need to unpack every single thing. Sometimes just enjoying the beauty of something is also a form of resistance. And with that, I am finished.
Wow, perfect timing. Thank you so much, Jasmine. I think that is something that is really refreshing for us over the pond because, we study a lot of old white men from the 19th century because that's where we feel confident and comfortable, I think. And actually, when you said, you can just enjoy a book for its beauty, not for its struggle, I think that's a really lovely quotation to take away when we're kind of planning our curriculums and choosing our texts. So thank you so much for joining us today from all the way from America. So thank you. Thank you so much. Brilliant. Next up, we have Kaylee Riley.
Hi.
Seamlessly into the PowerPoint, so I'm very pleased.
Magic. Hopefully it goes with me as I press the buttons.
So. Brilliant, but you're ready to go. So
yes. Thank you. So just going to put it into context, I guess, a bit like what Jasmine just said, making sure that we know why we're learning what we're learning. I'm a massive advocate for academic rigour without excuses, and I know that she's been mentioned numerous times today, but Jen Webb is somebody that's really inspired me in that respect. And I want to talk today about how we can teach the challenging texts without dumbing them down. And I know that often in English we have texts for each set ability, and that's something that I think we should be moving away from, particularly in light of knowledge-rich and expert-led and direct instruction. Right, I've pressed next slide. It's going with me, excellent. If we look at the principles of the national curriculum, and obviously this is a massively diluted version of what the national curriculum is, and I appreciate that academies and free schools don't have to follow the national curriculum, but I know that I've only ever worked in academies and they always have, so I think it's relevant to talk about. So this phrase has been mentioned lots today, the best that has been thought and said, but the national curriculum also should engender an appreciation of human creativity and achievement, which links a lot to what Jasmine was just talking about. The study is taught to all pupils. There's no, specification of what certain types of pupils, all, some, most might study. It should set high expectations for every pupil. Again, it's that aspiration, that ambition. And we should use assessment, which is deliberately ambitious, and lessons should be planned so there's no barriers to every pupil achieving. And so who are we as educators to say, well, actually, you got this in Key Stage 2, you have to study this? Because at that point, it's then when we, like Jasmine talked about, the gateway to the world being through literature text, we lock that gate behind us if we're not able to provide everybody with the same key. And the problem with choosing text to study per class setting, or having all different year group classes teaching, learning new different texts, is that it provides a lack of equity. So, and then that in turn leads to unfair assessments, because the data that comes from those assessments is completely useless for comparative analysis. And whilst data is not the crux of all that we do, it is how we report back on students' progress. And with the curriculum as a progression model, quoting Christine Council, it's here where we have to use the curriculum to see how we're progressing. And if you've got one group of year 7 studying Skellig, and you've got another group studying Oliver, and yet you're using the same approach to assess them, you can't truly say that the people that are doing really well in the Skellig analysis or the Skellig understanding are working at the same level as those that are doing Oliver Twist. And that's an example that I use all the time, because I know that it's an example that's been used in the last couple of years with a colleague of mine. And David Diddar talks about differentiation being one of the darkest arts in teaching. And if any of you attended my differentiation done well session, this is not dissimilar to that. I think when it comes to setting abilities, my ideal is mixed ability setting, but obviously that's not the case. It's not the case in my school. We have tiered setting, and it's not the case in many schools. And so we have to tackle that in the way that works within our context. But the setting of groups is often based on archaic historical data from Key Stage 3. We look at their Key Stage 2, that we look at their Key Stage 2 data, and we then set them based on that. Or we look at their CAT score in year 7, and we set them based on that. And that follows them through the trajectory of their school career. But can we really trust that data? Can we really say, well, that student got this, and their FFT 20 says that they should get this, so therefore we should be only teaching them this, this, and this? No, we shouldn't be able to do that, because what that does is it allows students to plateau or regress. We can't be sure, if we have settings like many of us do, we can't be sure that those settings are the right set. They might have been the right set in year 7 at the start, but actually that student might need a different set. But do we really think about that? Perhaps not as much as we should do. And then in turn, if we choose texts based on that setting, that Matthew effect comes in, doesn't it? Because we've often got, we've got lots of middling students who, if they're only accessing middling text, aren't accessing that high level academic vocabulary that you might get in a more academic text. And therefore, we're not exposing them to as many words as they should be, or as many high-level words as they should be. And in turn, we're adding and increasing to that, that really well-known phrase, that Matthew effect, because we're not exposing them to the vocabulary like what Hannah talked about earlier. And it's our moral obligation to expose students to a rich breadth of knowledge and language. Because all students are entitled, regardless of their historical academic performance, to be challenged in order to feel a sense of achievement. And this is just what Becky touched on. She says, we should expect no less just because they've got a disadvantaged title. I was a disadvantaged student at school, to challenge me and told me that I could do it, that are responsible for the place that I'm in now in my life. Life could have been a completely different set of outcomes if I hadn't have been pushed as this disadvantaged student. I was the first kid in my family to go to university, to even consider university, and it wasn't something that was considered until sort of year 9 when teachers were talking about it. And it was, well, none of my family have gone, I'll just get a job. And it's that lack of our aspiration. Sometimes we have to make sure that aspiration is there for our students. And if we're not exposing them to really challenging texts, and we're not putting them, you've got to imagine it as a dinner party, essentially. If they're sitting at a table with people who have access to those academic texts, how will that make them feel beyond exams? It's not just about exams. In fact, it's not about exams. Exams are a stopgap. It's about beyond. It's about their place in the world. And so how do we do that? How do we provide that equity? As teachers, we have to make a concerted effort with our language. We must model enthusiasm for desirable difficulty. We don't say, this is a test. We say low stakes, but this is a knowledge quiz. Let's see how much you've learned, rather than I'm going to test you on your knowledge. It's about our language and our positivity that comes from that. We accept and we embrace that our plans are not set in concrete, and we're flexible in our delivery. So if a student's not getting a certain concept or they're not getting a certain word, we stop, we address it, and then we move forward, so that, like Stuart said, we're not giving that sort of diminished diet. We're providing all of the things they need to be able to reach the next course, if we continue that metaphor. We pre-teach context and vocabulary explicitly. Again, that's been mentioned loads today, so I'm not going to go into it. But I think I had a bit of a debate with Heidi Drake on Twitter just now about why it's important to not have students acting out the Shakespearean when you've got finite time. And obviously it's down to context. But also we model how important it is to be able to look at those academic texts. We unpack the complexities through that modelling, and we constantly assess for understanding using formative assessment. And if we don't do that and we move on too fast, like Stuart said, that's when we start to see a disadvantage widening. And the reason why behind all of this is these 4 things: equity, because everyone deserves the same. Everyone deserves a place on the level playing field. It's not down to where we come from. It's not down to which school we go to as to how well and how successful we can become. That sense of achievement, and Jen Webb talks a lot in her books about, disadvantage. I know that I didn't want to be patronised. I was from, the roughest area where I'm from. I was, if you were going to pick out a rough area in Mansfield, you'd pinpoint where I was brought up. And I didn't want to be patronised because of that. I didn't want people to make assumptions about me, but they did. And actually that didn't give me a sense of achievement. But when I could access a text or a higher level of academia, that's when I had this sense of achievement, because I was motivated by that. And that in turn breeds positive relationships. We often have this, but I want my lessons to be fun, I want to engage my students. But actually, you're engaging the students with academic content, with your passion and with your belief in them. And then on top of all of that, it's workload based. Because if we are all teaching the same text, we can all use the same content of delivery, and we can all have a lot more time to think about, I'm going to read Jen Webb's book about Teach Like a Writer, because that's an area for my development. Or I'm going to read Kat Howard and Claire Hill's brilliant symbiosis, because I really want to understand the importance of, building a schemata in a curriculum. And it's that's where we draw the line there, because otherwise let's say you've got 5 teachers teaching 5 different groups. You've got 5 teachers planning 5 different sets. And also that's difficult to QA as a school leader. If we are trying to QA the importance or the effect of a scheme of work, how can we do that if they're all differently? Because we've got no means for comparison. And E.D. Hirsch in Cultural Literacy says, the attempt to individualise the content of the language arts curriculum has been a quixotic idea that has put teachers under enormous pressure to achieve the impossible. And obviously he's right. Cultural Literacy is a brilliant book. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. But my theory is that every class, the 1 minute bar is popping up, every class in every year group should be exposed to the exact same content, regardless of whether you think they're able or not. And that's because it allows all students the access to powerful knowledge. The academically challenging text then provides a level playing field that works to close gaps, eliminates that Matthew effect, and therefore allows our students to be on a level playing field with their peers and builds that relationship. They trust us because we trust them to be able to study in depth. And then I've just put on the slide, which will come out with the PDF, some further reading. I'm really sorry that I've sort of gone all the way through that, but I'm conscious of the 10-minute time and the banner popping up. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. I think the 10 minutes is a tough one.
It is really hard. Yeah.
It means that everyone's getting so much information all at once, and it really drives us forward. And thank you. That was really great. That looking at equity, sense of achievement, relationships, and workload. I think if you can give us 4 reasons for why you should be doing it, you should definitely be doing it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. Really
Take care.
Take care. Thank you. Brilliant. So next up, we have Ellie. So I've seen a tweet of her in our green room.
It's very blue. I have to have the curtains shut to avoid barking dogs in the background.
Oh, no, I love it. Now, let me get this right. Am I right saying that you were an attendee last time round and you're
yes.
Brilliant. So that's how Teach Meets hopefully evolve to. So if you're sat in the audience currently and thinking, oh, I wonder if I could do that, I think definitely you can in the future. So thank you for stepping up this time round, Ellie. Is your PowerPoint all working?
It doesn't seem to want to share. Hold on.
It's okay.
Oh, sorry, to add to technical issues.
That's okay. Are you using it in PowerPoint or are you using it in slides? Because it seems to like it in slides but doesn't like it in PowerPoint.
I'm using it in PowerPoint.
Ooh.
How? Oh, hold on.
Try it in PowerPoint. Sometimes it.
I don't understand what it's doing. Do you know what I may
try do? Ellie, try just sharing the screen instead of the application window. So when you click on the share at the bottom, there should be just the first one should say screen on the left.
Right, I'll quickly set it up so it's just full screen.
I do that after though. I flip to full screen once you click share. No worries.
Right. I apologise for the messy screen.
No, fine. As I said, Tom and I were rehearsing this last night and had exactly these problems last night. So I think, Tom, with 3 of us in here, I don't think it allows it to share the screen. Or is it? Oh, it's not wanting to do it.
Right. Do you know what I'm going to do? If it's okay with you, I'm just going to speak. I am going to make a reference to one of my slides, but there's nothing hugely important that is on there. So is that okay?
More than okay? And we can obviously share them for those who've signed up the resources, and it'd be like an extra special treat because they'll get to see them. All over to you, Early. Well done. Thank you.
My dodgy drawing of a staircase. So I am talking today about capitalising on the SATs. And I think that the SATs are kind of like a dirty word or a dirty acronym, to be precise. And it's something that starts to conjure up these feelings of sort of hatred and disgust. And even though they've been cancelled for the 2nd year in a row, the dialogue about curriculum content at Key Stage 2 seems to still be constantly in the headlines. And SATs bashing, as I've decided to call it, is often along the lines of tests having no educational value, or the fact that they leech the joy out of the English language. And it is quite easy, I think, to demonise them, especially when we're in secondary, because, you know, they do seem quite dry, quite dull, and they don't seem to prepare students that well for secondary school. But we have got to remember that that is not the purpose of them, in the same way that the purpose of GCSEs is not to prepare students for the myriad of options and opportunities that they have in post-16. And I think something that we have in Year 7 is quite often this compulsion to inject joy back into the curriculum by trying to steer clear of anything that's going to remind students about that SATs preparation and all of that SPAG content in particular. But that approach risks sacrificing this wealth of valuable learning, as well as putting us in a position that I know Lizzie tweeted about this actually earlier after Sophie's presentation, that we find ourselves in Key Stage 4 and 5 having to be like, write capital letters, this is how you use them. And it's frustrating every time it happens. It does happen all of the time. And it takes away from the sort of meatier, grittier elements of the curriculum that we want to spend our time on in Key Stage 4 and 5. So my solution that I'm putting forward is to capitalise on the SATs in Key Stage 3, which is essentially a very thin disguise, or not really a disguise at all, for curricular transition, which I'm forever banging on about. And I think that the benefits of uniting Key Stage 2 and 3 should be quite obvious, but again, it's really not that easy to do, especially when those end of phase tests in primary seem to be so dry. And it's tricky to work out as well how we can use what has been taught in preparation for the SATs and in upper Key Stage 2, not everything, I know not everything is that dry, but to inject that joy back into the curriculum while simultaneously refusing to sacrifice that knowledge that children and their teachers work so hard to secure. So I'd say there's two key areas of focus, which are unsurprisingly massive: curriculum content and assessment. And in order to understand how to have an impact on those areas, there's a few things that I think it's worth considering. And you'll see more of this when you get my PowerPoint slides. So if you look closely at the Year 6 writing outcomes and the GCSE writing mark schemes, there's very little that differs between the Year 6 expected standard and roughly what would equate to a grade 4 at GCSE for writing. There seems to be very little that is new that we can teach in Key Stage 3 in relation to writing skills. However, there's more scope with with reading. And if you were to flick through a Key Stage 2 SATs paper, what you would see for the reading questions is that they're generally short form questions with 1, 2 or 3 marks, and there's a heavy focus on inference and deduction, as well as selecting evidence from the text. So the accumulation of primary reading skills focuses on the what and the how of what other writers are doing. And in comparison, the demands of English GCSEs, again with reading, practically revolve around analysis, and slightly higher than that is the evaluation. And mark schemes, as you're all, I'm sure, going to have them coming out your ears at parts of the year, they're literally written to reflect that heightened importance of analysis over practically all other skills, which tend to be used in other questions to fine-tune the scores that a student will get. So secondary reading is mainly focused on the why of what other writers are doing. So much as it seems quite easy to laud the SATs and the GCSEs for being completely unrelated to one another, when you actually boil down the styles of assessments, there's a really clear logic to the model of progression that is anticipated from the reading curriculum. I'm going to make a slight jump to the fact that the teaching community recently has absolutely embraced research, and so we've got a much better understanding in our teaching of how the brain learns and stores information. We know retrieval practice is important, as is a structured, cumulative approach to knowledge. And from the time I've spent this far researching that chasm between primary and secondary phases of education, one thing's become abundantly clear. Primary schools are fantastic at assigning new learning to each year group with a clear progression of skills and content. And if you ask any primary teacher, I'm sure they could tell you what year group is first taught to use commas or question marks or fronted adverbials or whatever it might be. And equally in secondary schools, especially in light of Ofsted's wasted years document, curriculums tend to have that same logical progression from year 7 to 11. And I think Becky's keynote included some perfect examples of how we make progress visible. So whilst we might be in different schools and working from different documents and towards different outcomes, primary and secondary education are one single curriculum. And the challenges in realising that are immense, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing it. So we shouldn't have two disparate sets of steps, which you will see on my slides. It's literally just a staircase. We should have one continuous staircase that runs from reception through to year 11. And in the same way that a year 6 teacher will know if a student's knowledge of hyphens used to avoid ambiguity, for example, is secure, requires revision, or is entirely new, a year 7 teacher needs to have that same understanding. But instead, because of the vast organisational, locational, and other differences between these two compulsory phases, we're sometimes guilty of assigning that progression of learning from primary years into a great big bag of knowledge, which we then expect students to use independently, rather than continuing to build upon it in that really structured, progressive way. Equally, there seems to have been a lot of moves across the country from English teams to adopt chronological curriculums in terms of content in order to develop and strengthen schemas. And the same doesn't necessarily seem to have been applied to skills. And I wonder if perhaps in all the talk of a knowledge-rich curriculum, which I'm not critiquing, skills, which are necessary whatever the core focuses of your planning, seem to have taken a bit of a back seat. And I think often skills and literary concepts appear as a bit of an afterthought in schemes of learning, as if this list of important concepts has been drafted and sort of shoehorned into the Key Stage 3 curriculum wherever opportunities present themselves. So, for example, deciding that you'll teach the concept of antithesis while studying Othello in year 8, because you know that students will benefit from understanding that when they get to Romeo and Juliet in year 11. But surely the argument for building schemas applies to these concepts just as much as it does to the text choices that we make. And we need to consider how we develop schemas in terms of assessment as well. So I could hardly believe my luck this morning when Stuart Pryke began warning us of the dangers of a diminished diet in Key Stage 3, as well as talking about his use of slow writing. This idea that we can get a false impression of what students can do if we give them an unwieldy task is something that applies so obviously to scaffolding student assessment from SATs style to GCSE style over the course of those 5 years of secondary education. And a distrust of year 6 assessment by secondary schools, not individual teachers, so to speak, is something that has long been an issue. And again, Stuart's earlier suggestion that assessment design can negatively impact our understanding of a student's ability is core to the need to structure the move from one assessment style to the next. So overall, oh blimey, good timing, there's 2 core things that we can do to capitalise on the SATs to ensure that the somewhat stifled curriculum year 6 teachers dedicate themselves to isn't wasted, and to save ourselves much hassle in the long run of not having to reteach basic concepts in Key Stage 4 when we've got bigger fish to fry. 1, apply the good practice it seems we've been embedding in year 7 to 11 to that key transition from 6 to 7. It's not a blank slate or a fresh start. And if you're dedicated to developing student schemas of knowledge, then you must have a secure understanding of what they come to you knowing and how secure that knowledge is. So interleaving Key Stage 2 content through Key Stage 3 is important. And secondly, reviewing Key Stage 3 assessments. We don't have to assess all reading skills every time we assess reading. Reading assessments don't have to be in the form of extended paragraphs or essays. And your assessments should clearly support the progression from SAT style to GCSE style over the entire course of Key Stage 3. So that could even mean that the very first assessment you set for year 7s looks very similar indeed to an assessment that they might have seen in year 6. A very quick conclusion, I hope. Sorry if I run over by 15 seconds, Tom. Whilst I recognise that I focus mostly on how to utilise the SATs to our advantage as teachers, a quick note on joy in the English curriculum. If we adapt our curriculums and assessments so that they take advantage of that vast knowledge that students join us with in year 7, we're saving ourselves time, we give students opportunities to shine and hopefully add to that 30-odd% of positive thoughts that teenagers might have in a given day, and to develop their self-confidence, and we free ourselves up to really delve into that juicy content that we've got lined up for our students across Key Stage 3 and 4. An end.
Oh, hang on, I'm muted. There we go, unmuted. It was the first time when someone's done that. It had to be me who didn't do the unmute thing. Thank you so much for that, Ellie, and for combating the technology issues. I think we were talking about getting people to come on board and be part of the team. I think we need a technology advisor going forward. But thank you so much. Really interesting. I'm shocked by when you said about the writing expected standard at Key Stage 2 almost equates to a grade 4 at GCSE. I had never never looked at that before, but I'm going to go away and research that further and see. Well, I think that's amazing, because that tells us what they're capable of, and I think as secondary school teachers we forget that.
Yeah,
that's to our detriment. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brilliant stuff. And last, but by no means least, of our Teach Meet sessions today, we have Warren, again, coming all the way from America. So
thank you.
Not too early in the morning where you are. I don't know, whereabouts in America are you?
So I'm in Georgia, so it's not too late. It's 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock in the morning, so it's good. I'm gonna share my screen. Let's hope and pray for the best. Oh. Okay, can you guys see my presentation?
Not quite. No.
Maybe now? No?
Yes.
Oh, yay. Okay. Hi, guys. My name is Francesca Warren, and I am going to talk about using your teacher expertise the right way. Before we kind of get started, I wanted to let you guys know that I am an English teacher for 18 plus years. And so a lot of what I'm talking about is from the lens of not only being a teacher, teaching English, but I think it's really important because my time in the classroom as an English teacher really gave me the confidence to do this. So about 8 years ago, I was really, really frustrated, really, really fed up, not with the kids, not even with my coworkers, but the way that education in America is set up. And I really felt as if our voices as teachers were stifled. And maybe it's the English teacher in me, and I read a little too much of Zora Neale Hurston and Alice Walker, but I really wanted to find a way to amplify teacher voice. And I wanted to make sure that teachers felt like they were the experts in education. So many times as English teachers in your buildings, you are the experts in English and writing and reading and all these things. And so people will come to you and say, hey, I really have a question about this. What do you think about this? And people would come to me and, want to know, how do you teach writing? How do I teach reading? What are all the things that I do? And in the high school, it got to be a lot. And I felt like from a systematic way in our high schools in America, we were asking English teachers to kind of lead the building and lead the reading and writing in one big building. And so I started to use my frustration as a way for me to figure out what could I do to keep my passion, but also amplify my voice. And I started to think about empowerment, right? So when we talk about empowerment and expertise, as an English teacher, I was always telling my kids to write about how they felt, or to speak up when they felt there was something happening that they didn't like, or they needed more clarification on. And I realized that as a professional, I was not doing that for myself. I spent a lot of time not saying anything, and not even good or bad, right? Just like those small things where you think that the school should move in this direction, but no one asks you, or you think that, hey, we really need to be thinking about this, and no one asks you. And so I really wanted to make sure that the things that I told my children, that I told myself, that I was doing myself. And so I really wanted to talk about empowerment. And then going through, after feeling empowered, because here I was, an English teacher, I had 150 kids a day, and I really was trying to figure out, how do I amplify my voice and do it in a way that's beneficial for me, but also for my kids, because they were kind of on this journey with me. I really spent some time sitting in my expertise. So one of the things at the Educators Room that we consistently talk about is teachers are the experts in education, and we have to amplify their voices. And so I really and truly, for a good 3 to 4 months, I really had to come out of my body when I was teaching, and I really had to think about, what is my expertise? And I had to take an inventory of it. This is not an easy process. This is something that took me a long time. It took me talking to my kids. What do you guys think I teach really well? What do you think of me as a teacher? My colleagues, just everybody around me. And I really, really, really spent a lot of time inventorying myself. And as a teacher, we do this with kids, right? As an English teacher, I would have students write essays. I would have students, do a short test just to kind of see what their expertise or what their learning was going to be. But I never did it for myself. And the results were eye-opening, right? I was literally sitting there looking at all the things that I was doing, and I was thinking, why am I not speaking with authority and being proud of it? I remember giving kids essays to write, and especially we talk advanced placement in the United States, and they were going to do the language class, English language class. And I remember telling my kids that you have to feel like you're the expert. You need to make sure you speak on this. And I remember teaching them this years and years in a row, but realizing that there were many times when I was in the room or on the fringe of a room or had a chance that I would speak with authority, but I would be really, really, really like nervous, right? I would be not only just nervous, but I would be kind of thinking maybe I shouldn't be in the room. Maybe there are other people who should be there. Maybe I don't know what I mean. And so what I had to realize as I talked about amplifying my voice and teacher voice, I really had to speak with authority and be proud of it. And this is, when we're talking about amplifying teacher voice and teacher expertise, this is something that does not come easy for all teachers. I felt like I was a very assertive teacher. I would speak up. But when I got into the room where it was my superintendent or a group of principals or people who weren't even in education, was I spending time really speaking with authority and being proud of it? Also, I had to get out of my feelings, right? So I was at a point in education, I think I was on year 12, and you guys know how it is. You're feeling very, very it's just like teacher burnout. What am I going to do? Sometimes you feel sorry for yourself. And I really had to get out of my feelings. I really had to spend a lot of time really thinking about, did this inventory. I had said I was going to start speaking with authority. I was going to start doing certain things. And I had to get out of my feelings of not feeling appreciated, because as much as I didn't like it, this is a job I love, but they're not responsible for my happiness. And so I had to spend a lot of time really journaling and figuring out, what am I going to do with my expertise? How do I really push it? And what do I do so that it's not just about me? Some of it is, right? But how do I make sure that I'm showing my students how to advocate for myself, and I'm showing other teachers on how to advocate for themselves? So I didn't limit your time for what matters, right? As an English teacher, and I have 150 essays to grade in a week, and I have feedback, and I have grades, and I have conferences, and we got to go to get through this book. It really taught me in the classroom that I needed to get to the point. So there were so many times where I can remember sitting and having my kids do things that didn't have any academic value. They were just things that I wanted them to do because I felt like it was going to help them. I'm not saying it doesn't have merit, but I had to limit my time. So I really had to focus my class around strictly writing and responding to reading through writing. And so this was a shift, but it allowed my kids to really understand, to find their passion. But also for me, it allowed me to really be specific on what I needed to do. When I talk about limiting your time, that's professionally, but that's also personally. There were times as I was going through this renaissance of teacher expertise where I had to say, I really cannot dedicate my time to this. I really cannot volunteer my time to this. I had to have laser-like focus. And it helped me to get over those feelings that I was feeling blah and I didn't really like my job, but it helped me really focus on my kids deserve a part of me, but I also deserve a part of me. And I had to establish my expertise. So, we've talked about the inventory. We've talked about, making sure that you manage your time. When I looked at that inventory, I really had to figure out what was I really good at as a teacher. If I had to bet my paycheck on something, what would it be? And one of the things that I always ask people when I talk to them about this is, if you had to, in 5 seconds, complete a presentation very quickly, what would you talk about? And for me, I am a really good writing teacher, specifically to students who are underserved, specifically to students who are struggling writers. And so I really had to establish my expertise. For me, I decided to start a blog, and the blog grew into an education website, and through that grew a book. I begin to speak, all of these things, but you really have to think about establishing it, right? When someone Googles you, Miss Moore, the English teacher, are they going to see your expertise? I remember speaking as a teacher and teaching advanced placement and looking for certain materials, and there were teachers who I would find their sites, and it was clear they were the experts in teaching advanced placement. It was clear because they spent so much time honing their craft. So you have to establish it, and then you have to make sure that in that establishment that you have written a book, created a curriculum, whatever you're going to do, but you've done it so that when people are looking for what you are the expert in, your name pops up. And I had to spend some time envisioning myself in 1, 3, and 5 years. So I am on year 8 of my journey with the Educators Room. And this is the first year. We've done lots of good things. We've been published nationally. I have 45 plus writers. We write about all topics in education. Now I'm getting to the point at 8 years where I was feeling stagnant, right? And remember, I talked about that it's not up to my school or to my job to make me feel valued. I have to. So I've really been spending this year going into strategic planning with my team on, okay, we're amplifying teacher voice. We have this huge blog. We have thousands of articles. We're being featured everywhere. We're being interviewed. What do we do now with the next 5 years? And so it really made me get out of my comfort zone once again and start to work towards that. In addition, I had to make this work fun, right? A lot of people always ask me, why haven't you left the classroom? What do you do? Because my classroom is my research. And that's what I think about it. I think about it as a learning lab. So as we're talking about writing, if I think a strategy will work, I'm going to use it with my children, and then I'm going to document it in this online blog, right? I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about the failures and what happened, what went well, and what was okay. And it also helps me because I share this journey with my children, right? I tell them, hey guys, just like you're learning about Macbeth, or you're learning about Zora Neale Hurston, or The Color Purple, or whatever you're learning about, I tell them that I am sitting in this work right now and I am being comfortable about my gift. And this is what I'm learning about. And they actually find it pretty cool because I didn't, I couldn't have ever thought about this, but having a blog or having a YouTube is kind of like their thing now. And so they're very interested in, well, how did you get started? What did you do? And then, knowing that the destination is hard, but the story is in the journey, right? Teachers come to me all the time and they say, oh my God, I love what you've built with the Educators Room. How can I do it myself? And I tell them there's no easy fix. This work that I've done to amplify teacher voice, to use my expertise as an English teacher and move to the next phase of life for me has been all in the journey. And so I tell people all of my funny stories on things what happened, and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe you went through it. I'm like, yeah, I didn't laugh when I was going through it, but now as I'm going through it, it has taught me a lot. Any questions that you guys have, you can reach out to me via email. I think I'm right under 10 minutes. I'm not sure.
You probably are, Francesca. It was my fault because I forgot to time it. So I wasn't entirely sure where you were up to. So blame me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just thank you guys for this opportunity. And I see the comments there.
No, absolutely wonderful. And I think that bit that you said, like when people ask you, why haven't you left your classroom? And for you, your classroom is your research. Yeah. I think we're really bad at assuming that all teachers want to progress out of our classroom. And actually our classrooms are our happy places. That's where the people are. And there's no bad thing in that. So thank you for reminding us of that.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me.
Well, thank you for coming. Thank you so much. Brilliant. So now I'm going to actually pass back over to Tom, who's going to take 2 seconds to talk about the last of our sponsors. And then we're going to get the lovely Freya on.
Yeah, so obviously today's event is sponsored by Pupil Progress, by Wellbe. Do check them out, do support them because they're ensuring that we can keep running these events as we are. But also 2 others that we haven't mentioned as much today is GCSE Simplified. Now, I know Kate, who is on our TMEnglishicons Twitter, is going to post a link to GCSE Simplified. They've got some really big discounts on their workbooks. So I know Kate's going to she may have already tweeted out, but I know she's going to about this on GCSE Simplified. So look out for that. And the other thing is TES Resources. Now, obviously, they are our venue partner. Normally, we are in Sheffield for these events. It's face-to-face. We have a free bar courtesy of TES. And, you know, we'd probably all be sloshed by now. No, we wouldn't really. I'm sorry. But we do normally have this face-to-face atmosphere and everything. But I have to say, today, even from an online perspective, has been wonderful. So thanks to TES Resources and all our other sponsors. I'm going to pass back to Lizzie now to introduce our final keynote.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tom. So we've got Freya Odell as our final keynote speaker. And I'm really excited. We've got a really lovely international flavour today, which I'm really loving. So from sunny Southern Europe, we've got Freya. Obviously, we've had our friends from over the pond, and actually Kate, who's tweeting for us, is in Abu Dhabi. So TMEnglishicons is taking over the world. Freya, she's an English teacher in Rome. She is a passionate advocate for teaching and learning, and she's published really widely on her blogs talking about English. So she's going to be talking today about the teaching of writing. And so it's all over to you, Freya. I'm glad to see the technology is working. Can't wait to hear what you've got to say.
I hope so. It's held out all day, but you never know here. And I hope everyone's got their aperitivos by their side. So good afternoon, everyone. What an absolutely incredible day. My brain is buzzing, and I'm so glad that so much of what I'm going to say is going to connect with what has already gone. As Lizzie said, my name is Freya, and I'm absolutely honoured to be asked to talk today and to be the last key speaker, especially given that I am an international educator currently working at St George's British International School in Rome. Now, when I was considering what to speak about today, the obvious choice was reading, something I have spoken about a lot. In 2013, I joined a school in an area of high deprivation with a transient population and a lot of forces students. As a result, the majority of pupils entered with incredibly low reading ages, and part of my work as head of department was to try and establish a really positive reading culture. I last spoke about reading at the Seneca English Conference, linking my work with this school to some of my more updated thinking at my current school in terms of breadth and opportunities for reading both inside and outside of the classroom. However, I wasn't convinced I wanted to talk about reading again today. I mean, it's easy to get typecast, isn't it? But this did leave me with a bit of a problem. What to talk about? You see, when we listen to people speak, we kind of want to listen to experts. And besides reading, I can't say that I feel too expert in a lot of English-related things. I had a word with myself, though, and reminded myself that today is all about continuous professional learning, continuous professional development. And so I decided to talk about something that I feel that I am crap at. Now, in my head, I have the wonderful Hannah Wilson telling me to reframe what I've just said, but I don't mind admitting to a small group of people that there are a few things that I don't think I'm very good at. In fact, I think we should all feel confident enough to say that there are things that we aren't very good at, as long as we balance it out with what we're doing about it. So today, I'm going to talk about something I've struggled with for years and what I'm trying to do to improve my thinking and my practice in this area. Today, I'm going to talk about the teaching of writing. Now, the reason I struggle with the teaching of writing is because it is really, really complex with many layers and many different things to take into consideration. When we think about the teaching of literature by comparison, the process seems a lot simpler. We choose a text, we focus on the key concepts and the big ideas, we explore methods and how they create meaning, and we use a tight but loose structure in responding to the text, something like what, how, why. Trying to tackle all of these things in a 5-week writing unit can feel incredibly overwhelming. And sometimes I know I've struggled to do it well, making me feel like I'm not quite getting it right. That was until I read something in Barbara Blyman's most recent book, What Matters in English Teaching, and I realized that I wasn't quite alone. She writes, I once had a phone call from an English consultant working with a large number of trainee teachers, asking me for advice about the teaching of writing. She was looking for just one single foolproof approach. This was me, I felt. I wanted the teaching of writing to be as straightforward as the process of reading. Sadly, Barbara said it wasn't to be. Barbara said I was flummoxed. There wasn't a single way either of writing or teaching of writing that I could possibly hope to offer. There couldn't be. There are so many different kinds of writing and so many different approaches that identifying just one as the approach was impossible. Did this make me feel better? Not really. But I did decide to ease up on giving myself a hard time instead and start to consider some of the practicalities head on. So today I'm going to present on what I've been reading, thinking about, and trying to change about my practice with regard to the teaching of writing. I'm going to focus in on 3 core areas: knowledge, the process of writing and the importance of oracy as part of this process, and the role of grammar. I apologise that I'm going to speed talk through the enormous amount of content I have prepared. So in recent years, the term knowledge rich has become more popular when used to describe our curriculum offering. I wanted to consider writing's place within a knowledge rich curriculum. As we've seen, there's a lot of knowledge to consider, but I'm going to focus in on one aspect of that knowledge that I was really prompted to reflect upon after reading Jennifer Webb's fantastic book, Teach Like a Writer, The Knowledge of Text Type. In the book, Jenny dedicates a chapter to a different type of writing and speaks with an expert in that field to extract their knowledge and thinking about this. As a result of reading this book, I then really started to question my own level of expertise. I asked myself, to what extent would I consider myself to be an expert in the different types of writing? And the answer is that I'm not much of an expert after all. I went to the highest level, the IB diploma program at Key Stage 5, and the table presented there summarises the text types that students are expected to have knowledge of over the duration of the course. I realised in rag rating myself that whilst I felt confident with some text types, mainly the ones evident at IGCSE interestingly, there were others where I felt my own knowledge and expertise was severely lacking. And as I was reading Jenny's book, I began to really think about how we develop this expertise. With literature, again by comparison, we spend a lot of time focused on our subject knowledge. Take The Teaching of Macbeth, for example. We buy Stuart and Amy's book. We buy study guides. We buy resource packs. We look at critical essays. We sit in department meetings and discuss big ideas and approaches to the teaching of key concepts. We tune into Lit Drive sessions. My point being here is that do we really do the same for writing and give it equal weight? So I decided that I would start to read more. At the time when I was reflecting upon Jennifer's book, I was thinking about the short story form in preparation for the teaching of a unit here. And I reached out to Louisa Enstone, English Lulu on Twitter, to ask her for some recommended reading to develop my own subject knowledge. In approaching the enhancement of subject knowledge in the same way as I would a literary text, I felt my expertise with regard to specific types of writing really start to develop and seen my schemes of work become more rigorous as a result. What Jenny's book did for me, however, and for many others, I am certain, was make me really question how much time we invest in reading and researching the type of writing, which, to be clear, is only one aspect of knowledge within writing, but how much more of this we could do to ensure equity between language and literature, especially given its importance. Now, Alan Peat argues in his book, The Ultimate Guide to Nonfiction, that as we develop our expertise with regard to the different forms of writing, there are three things we need to consider: the structural makeup of these forms, the language features of the form, and how both of these are fit for purpose. And he structures his own very practical book in a way so that he offers a definition of the form, he identifies the commonalities with regard to structural and linguistic features, and he draws upon an exemplar. This got me thinking about my IB table of text types once again. Did I feel I could confidently talk about the language and structural features of each text type? Could I confidently say what they were? Was this an area of my subject knowledge that I needed to develop? So bearing in mind that Pete's book is aimed at Key Stage 2, lower Key Stage 3 potentially, I've decided to work with my IB students on something similar for their IB language and literature programme. This derives from their recent mock, for which they had the option to analyse a manifesto, and I wasn't certain that I had covered manifesto or that all of my pupils would actually understand what a manifesto was. I thought they'd all go with the report. So I thought producing a handbook such as this would be a useful springboard, and a springboard only, for us all to work from. Now, as this process has evolved, so has the production of this guidebook. And I've come to realise that actually one exemplar in a guidebook is nowhere near enough if we want to have a really solid understanding of a text type or a form of writing. We need a bank of text types. I realised this after working with Year 9 on opinion columns. After reading the opinion column by Caitlin Moran, one pupil stuck his hand up and asked me if all opinion columns were that informal or colloquial. This made me realise the importance of reading a range of exemplars and having a bank to draw upon, which enables us to more confidently draw upon the commonalities of a text type or a form, but also recognise the variance within types and forms too. What a great opportunity for wider reading. However, this is one area that I think our wonderful online community could draw together. I remember seeing the fabulous Becky Wood put out a tweet for exemplar character or setting descriptions last week and pondered how wonderful it would be if we could use a platform like LitDrive, for example, to share exemplars for different text types, forms, and for more specific foci such as metaphor, perhaps. All of this being copyright dependent. What a wonderful resource that could be. But teacher knowledge is only one half of the game. What about student knowledge? Here I was exposed to an interesting tension, knowledge with regard to voice versus knowledge of the stylistic features involved in writing. My reading in CPD has led me to reframe this as voice before stylistics. Having been in a number of Barbara Byman's webinars recently, this is something I've been thinking a lot about. Indeed, Barbara states in What Matters in English Teaching that when Lucy Webster and I have worked with underperforming students, asked in by teachers to help them improve their writing, it has always been the case that the technical aspects of their writing are a less significant problem than their uncertainty about what they should be saying. Having good ideas, being in charge of the material, and having confidence in exploring them is a bigger problem than paragraphing, punctuation, or academic signposting. In creating our knowledge-rich teacher as expert, pupil as novice curriculums, have we been guilty, perhaps, in reducing the amount of opportunities for pupils to have a voice within our classrooms? And if so, how can we build in opportunities that allows them the space to think, reflect, and steer the nature of the work they do before they focus in on some of the more technical aspects of writing? Since listening to Barbara, I've been working really hard to ensure that there are greater opportunities for pupils' voices to be heard, for the shaping of their ideas and the development of personal expression, which in turn, I think, impacts upon the quality of their writing. This most resonated with me initially when we approach a literary text, in fact, so reading, where we can be in a rush to dive in to derive meaning straight away, rather than giving pupils the time and space to personally respond. In our new remote world, the opportunities for providing a private space to use writing to reflect and respond to text has definitely increased. One tool I use is Mentimeter. Here, after reading a passage to Africa, pupils had an opportunity to reflect upon what they had read. And what was really interesting was the emotional impact the reading of that text had on pupils, and that actually there was a greater need for me to unpack this before diving into an analysis of the piece. I did a similar task with my Year 12s after reading Death of a Naturalist, which I view as quite a challenging poem. But the opportunity for using writing as a form of self-expression showed me that they had a far greater grasp of the poem than I had previously anticipated, meaning that I was able to change the direction of my lesson into something more meaningful. But I'm here to talk about writing right, as text rather than response. So how does this work when we're teaching a writing unit? Well, choice and knowledge come into play in helping to develop voice. Blyman argues that choice, whether of genre or style or in the title of the topic, offers a chance to make something your own and do something individual and unique. Students can rise to this challenge. Indeed, this term I've been exploring opinion columns with Year 9, and after reading Jennifer Webb's work where she advocates for choice too, I decided to allow pupils to determine the topic of their writing. Few pupils writing about topics of greater interest to them: privacy, well-being, public transport, climate change, capital punishment, and the construction of a more passionate and engaging voice through their work. But if pupils are to write authentically about this topic, passion will only get them halfway. They also need knowledge to help them create a voice that empowers them to write intelligently and convincingly. And therein lies another question. Do we spend enough time in the classroom supporting pupils in developing their voice in knowledgeable and intelligent ways? Andrew Tharby, in Making Every English Lesson Count, when reflecting on his teaching of writing, says the following: in recent years, I've taken a different tack. This has involved dedicating more lesson time to the direct teaching of the topic the class will be writing about. A recent unit on writing a speech about child poverty involved dedicating time to explicitly teaching the class about child poverty in the UK, with the help of broadsheet articles in an excellent BBC documentary, and less time teaching generic speech writing techniques. Often, English teachers expect all students to build their topic knowledge by setting independent research as homework. Unfortunately, this task disadvantages those students who do not have the research skills and background knowledge to find useful and credible facts and ideas. My new approach led to better speeches which contained developed arguments and well-researched evidence. The most able in the class were given the option of a more challenging spin on the same kind of task. Would a more equal world be a better world? Here they could weave in their wider background knowledge. Jennifer Webb, in her recent book, reflected on her own practice in a similar way, sharing these reflections at last year's event about how she had moved from expecting pupils to write several examples of a newspaper article in a term to a model in which she encouraged an authentic writing experience. As a result, she built in a research period in which she taught pupils how to gather data, conduct interviews, fact check, leading to work that was more authentic in nature because it supported pupils to create an intelligent voice that could approach a task in an insightful way. This deliberate teaching of the research process is something that I've now embedded into my practice, working with Year 9 on their opinion columns. And when combined with pupils having choice with regard to the topic, the development of their own voice in their writing is becoming a very powerful thing. One way in which we can help to organize people's knowledge and check that there is an appropriate depth in the writing is through a resource that I found incredibly useful in the classroom, the single paragraph outline from the Writing Revolution. The benefit of this resource is that it supports pupils to organize their knowledge into distinct writing blocks, maintaining a clear focus throughout with strong topic sentences articulating clear arguments and ideas. But it also helps to check that there is substance to what the pupils are trying to say through the use of a range of relevant and appropriate supporting details, which they draw upon from the research they've conducted. Okay, so that's knowledge. But what about the process of teaching writing? We've talked about the importance of exemplars, the importance of understanding the linguistic and structural makeup of writing. We've talked about developing and empowering student voice through choice and knowledge, and we focused a lot on non-fiction writing. But who else could help me understand more about the process of writing, perhaps more about creative writing? And the answer is our Key Stage 2 colleagues. I am constantly amazed by the incredible writing produced at Key Stage 2 and the displays of this writing that we see quite regularly in Twitter. I'm also often mystified about how they do it and regularly find myself asking them to share their magic, how it is that they get such brilliant work from their pupils. Now, I have the benefit of working in an all-through school, so recently approached our Key Stage 2 team to ask them if I could come and watch some writing lessons as I was seeking to improve my practice. I observed one of my colleagues, Vicky, and was blown away by the lesson I saw. The pupils were studying portal stories and were at the end of their pieces of writing, which were absolutely beautifully constructed. I watched as the pupils at the start of the lesson stood up and recited the passage from Harry Potter where they end up in Diagon Alley. I noted that there was some dual coding of the story at the front of the room. I then watched mouth wide open as they then recited their innovation text. Pupils then worked on proofreading the work that they had previously produced before going back to finish the final paragraph of their own portal story. I approached Vicky, completely taken aback by what I'd seen and the quality of pupils' writing, and asked her to explain it all to me. And thus began my introduction to the Talk for Writing programme. The programme follows a distinct process of teaching writing, and I am focused on the teaching of creative writing mostly here. It begins with a mentor text, which the class story map together and learn off by heart. This mentor text is then boxed out before choosing specific aspects of the text to deliberately practice. When pupils have a more enhanced understanding of the text, they begin their innovation text, story mapping and learning orally once again. Finally, pupils produce their own independent version of the text. Story mapping is where the mentor text is taken and reduced down into what we might refer to or more commonly known as dual coding. The purpose being to aid visual memory so the children can see the plot. We know from considerable research that the process of turning words into graphic representations aids memory. It means that the learning of a model text orally is simpler because they hear it, say it, draw it, see it, move to it and perform it, and therefore every child can learn it. The point being, Pi Corbett argues, is that it's very powerful if they learn a model text orally so they begin to internalize those patterns and add them to their linguistic competency. They have to actively hear it, say it, play at it, dramatize it, and that will allow them to read it. Children can't write sentences unless they can say them, and they can't say a sentence unless they have heard it. We need to model language. Next, the text is boxed out to establish the underlying pattern. In this example linked to Finding Tales, a pattern emerges whereby in the opening of the story, for example, the main characters are in an everyday setting and find an interesting object. And the actual text is transferred to this boxed out section to illustrate this to the children. Pupils then work with their teacher to focus in on key stylistics that contribute to the effectiveness of a particular type of writing, using a sequence of lessons and deliberate practice to go over these elements. Here you can see a toolkit of features for the writing of suspense, provided before pupils are asked to consider how many of those features they can find within a particular paragraph of writing. Pupils are then given the opportunity to focus in on one of these aspects, show not tell in this example, and complete exercises dedicated to this particular skill, knowing that we will improve the success of writing later on. This part of the process is probably the one that we're most familiar with. The class then work on their innovation text. Oh, sorry, just lost my thingy. Sorry. There we go. Okay. Yeah, the class then work on their innovation text. This is where the class co-construct a text based upon what they have learned from the mentor text, working on one paragraph at a time. Again, this is something familiar to every secondary teacher. However, the program presents a range of possibilities at the innovation stage. Given that I would want to focus in on a particular form of writing or idea, I particularly like the use of substitution, addition, alteration, or changing the time, person, or view. But the idea of the innovation stage being that those who need to hug the mentor text closely can throughout the process, whilst the more able can start to embellish. Once the innovation text is produced, pupils should be given the opportunity to reflect upon the text in terms of whether the clearly identifiable underlying pattern is evident, how well particular grammatical structures and punctuation have been used, and the embedding of new vocabulary and the use of writerly tools. Having then seen a model, worked with the writer's toolkit, and considered the underlying structure, pupils are able to work on an independent piece with each section of the writing completed bit by bit, and opportunities to return to the pieces and edit and tweak, as in the lesson I saw. And again, whilst less able students are able to hug the mentor and the innovation text more closely, more able students can use the levels of innovation to embellish the writing further. Observing this lesson and learning more about Talk for Writing made me reflect more deeply upon the Year 7 unit I've recently been teaching on memoirs. We had our mentor text and we spent a lot of time on the toolkit, exploring the use of sensory language and sentence constructions for effect. However, I didn't present the whole text first before focusing in on key paragraphs, which meant that there was a lack of whole text understanding. And we didn't learn the text orally, which we could have easily done to internalize some of those beautiful structures. Now, instead of co-constructing, something that I am super nervous about, I offered pupils a second exemplar text. And upon reflection, it would have been better had I constructed this text to offer pupils a second opportunity for internalization and processing, especially if pupils were to learn this text orally as well. And this meant that the work that I got in was variable. While most of my able pupils were able to independently produce something using the toolkit and drawing upon the exemplars, the less able missed the intention of the paragraph, although they did demonstrate an understanding of what a memoir is by focusing on a memory. Had I worked with my less able students in a guided group, slightly harder to do at the moment with social distancing, I might have been able to address the misconceptions from the get-go. All in all, observing my colleague and reading up on Talk for Writing, though, has really enabled me to reflect on the strengths and weaknesses of my current practice. Now, of course, there are some limitations to the process and to the approach. It mainly works with narrative, creative, imaginative writing from what I've seen, and this is something I want to unpick with my Key Stage 2 colleague. But I think it also has a secondary life limit in terms of approach to Year 8 potentially. It does, though, raise some interesting considerations around oracy and its power to help pupils internalize structures and add to their linguistic competency that could have wider reaching benefits across all of Key Stage 3 and beyond. I'd like to thank Pi Corbett for allowing me to share these resources and would recommend anyone who finds this as fascinating as I do to hit the Talk for Writing website. In the interim, my Key Stage 2 colleague, who is so graciously giving up her time, is going to work with me on the co-construction of the first Year 7 unit, which is a descriptive piece focused on Greek and Roman mythology, so that she can help me to develop my understanding of the process further, but so that we can foster greater cohesion between the two year groups, with Year 6 being fully invested in the Talk for Writing process. And finally, very quickly, the teaching of grammar, an area I'm particularly passionate about. Does the teaching of grammar have a place within a writing curriculum? Well, of course it does. Deborah Myhill states that I believe there is a role for grammar in the curriculum. Understanding how language works, how meanings are subtly shaped by lexical and syntactical choices, how language changes in different contexts, the differences between spoken and written English, between standard and non-standard varieties, all of these are central to a rich language curriculum. Carter and McCarthy usefully distinguish between grammar as structure, how words, sentences, and texts are constructed, and grammar as choice, the range of possibilities to a language user. They argue that the grammar of choice is as important as the grammar of structure. Our knowledge and understanding of grammar as teachers, therefore, is critical. In Europe, we have the Common European Framework of Reference for Grammar with a sliding scale of knowledge and competence. Our pupils range from A1 to C1, so this is something that needs to be taken into consideration in our teaching. But when we look at these lists and consider our own knowledge, how confident do we feel in teaching such grammatical concepts? And should more CPD time be dedicated to this as a result? The same can be said when we look at the Key Stage 2 glossary. How confident do we feel in teaching these grammatical concepts that by the time they reach us in Key Stage 3, our pupils are well versed in? And the question then should therefore be, how far are we utilising our Key Stage 2 colleagues to support and aid our knowledge development within this domain if it is an area we don't feel so confident about? Now, the teaching of grammar itself is contentious with two distinct camps: teaching grammar in a decontextualised way versus teaching grammar within context. And as always, I'm not a fan of dichotomies, and I think that both have their place. Jeff Barton argues that if pupils are going to be assessed chiefly in all subjects in writing, then he believes the main criterion for assessment in English is that of grammatical control. Therefore, he says, let's teach them specifically and systematically what they need to know. I like the systematic approach to the teaching of grammar and believe it has its place. I teach a lot of grammar using Do It Now tasks, as these are perfect for those discrete units of knowledge. I've also found that for reinforcement and consolidation, the use of Google Forms at this time has been really useful. The act of drilling pupils in this way really helps to consolidate their understanding of a particular structure before they have to utilise it within their own writing. However, I also see the value of teaching grammar in context, drawing upon beautiful grammatical constructions from the text that we teach and utilising these with students. Here in a Year 7 memoir unit, we explored the use of the repetitive structure in Cider with Rosie for the first time to draw attention and emphasis to this being an early and significant memory. We then saw this structure in a second example. Finally, pupils were tasked with utilising the same structure in their own writing as they wrote about their own memory. Our exemplar choices, therefore, are key because they should provide us with this rich tapestry of language to explore and replicate, but offer clear reasons for the utilisation of such constructions. Where this works most effectively is in the teaching of sentences, which I think is one of the most important aspects of the teaching of writing. Sentence structure is important because, as Jeff Barton states, it provides us with the framework for the clear written expression of ideas. My work with sentences began in 2016 when I was trying to support my pupils in varying their sentence structure and used an ice-based grid to do this. Grania Hallahan took this idea on and developed it into Upgrade Your Sentence. The aim of this resource was to offer deliberate practice opportunities with regard to creating a varied range of sentence structures. But in reflection, I've come to realise that this initial idea of mine wasn't as effective as first thought if we want to consider the production of really impactful writing. Instead, what is more important than ensuring variety is ensuring that we know the reason for using a particular grammatical construction. Both Jeff Barton here and Chris Curtis in his excellent book, How to Teach English, refer to the importance of sentences being used to create particular effects for a specific purpose or a specific intended effect. Jeff says short sentences can create suspense or give clarity. Compound sentences can create a colloquial conversational feel. Complex sentences can convey a bulk detail in compressed form. Whilst Chris says that in putting the emphasis on the effect, he saw the writing from his students become instantly better. He argues that pupils need to understand the how and the why of the sentences being constructed in a particular way. Lindsay Skinner presents this beautifully in her book, Crafting Brilliant Sentences. In the book, she presents a grammar program for Key Stage 4, which is very much focused on how grammatical structures can be used for particular effects. For example, using nouns to create imagery or simple sentences to create narrative hooks. This is a stunning resource for all departments to have to support the teaching of writing. And yet, we must be mindful of just pulling these lessons off the shelf. We must also consider in our own departments the strategic placement of lessons like this. Kate McCabe has done this beautifully. An absolutely phenomenal educator, this is my last slide, I promise. She began to reflect upon her English curriculum with a focus on the acquisition of sentences and sentence grammar. After feeling that the way in which she approached the teaching of sentences was disorganized, with some classes being taught the same sentence types year after year, or being taught a sentence structure as they never appeared, never to return to them again, she found herself in a position where she was lobbing sentences at year 11 in the hope that some might stick. As a result, she set to work on constructing a deliberate sentence curriculum. She took key sentence structures, many from Alan Peat, and mapped them against the unit she was teaching. The schemes of work she wrote modelled responses that contain the sentence structures being taught before supporting pupils in utilising them themselves. Over the course of Key Stage 3, Kate aimed to teach pupils 32 different sophisticated sentence constructions within context, with purpose, focused on impact, so that by the time pupils approached Key Stage 4, they had a useful repertoire of sentence constructions at their disposal. I absolutely love this approach to the teaching of sentences, something I've come to realize is so fundamental to the importance of high quality writing. In the summer term, I'm going to go through a similar process, mapping sentence constructions to the units we teach and the exemplars we have to ensure I have a much more meaningful sentence curriculum with real purpose and intent to support pupils to clearly express their voices and their ideas. So, in summary, I said I was going to speak quickly, and I know I was incredibly ambitious. I hope I've provided some thought there around the teaching of writing and the ideas that I'm currently having. I will pin this presentation to my Twitter page, and if you have any questions or comments, please fire away back on Twitter. Thank you very much. I can't hear you, Lizzie, sorry.
Oh, unmute me. I think it's deliberate anyway. Saying thank you very much. I think that's really, really interesting. I mean, when we talk about talk for writing and oracy, I think we forget about it now that particularly in our GCSE, it's not something that we're allowed to focus on because it's, you know, we do give it a mark, but it doesn't go towards their grade. And so we forget about it. And actually, it's really key. And it's a key skill that they need to take away when they're not in school, when they're in their actual everyday lives. So it's great to really see how that's worked for you in the classroom and your Key Stage 2 colleagues as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You legend. That was quality. That absolutely amazing. All right. Okay, this is exciting now, isn't it? We got 2 poets coming up to finish this incredible day, haven't we?
Yes, and I was going to say, you jinxed it earlier when you said we'd be finished at 3:30, and then tech problems came along.
I managed to con Mark to come back because we have to play Inset Day like before this thing finishes. It has to play because it's quality. So Mark will be coming on. Basically, we've got 2 poets. I'm going to let you do the introductions, Lizzie. I'm going to shut up now.
Thank you very much. You can meet yourself rather than me. So first up, we've got Wada Yassin, who is a fantastic poet, a teacher herself, the Poet Laureate in Sheffield, and winner of the Women's Poet Prize 2020. So thank you so much for coming along today to close out our day of learning. It's great to have you with us.
Hello, hi. Thank you for asking me. As an English teacher, it's been just really informative and wonderful. And my notes are full, and I'll be taking this to the classroom as well. I'm going to read from my pamphlet, Tea with Cardamom. I'm a British Somali poet as well, and those sensibilities found themselves in my work. So the first one that I'm going to read is called Blick. For context, Blick is like a derogatory term used for people with a kind of dark skin. It's a term that I heard a lot in secondary school and reclaimed back in this poem. So Blick. I told my sister we should start a revolution and reclaim this word, blick, because I'm so blick, like tarmac on a freshly laid road in a close-knit community, like the dabrad of charcoal burning the frankincense, smoking under a mother's garment, blick, blicker than your coffee on a Monday morning, blick with a Vaseline sheen, blicker than any sheep, no cling film wrapped or bottle bleach. I'm the sky's landscape. My elbows ashen top boulders silhouetting the night. My cheeks the sun's promise of staying. The first man to read the Adhan was Bilal, who is blick. The noor of his face filtering through the moonlight. The timbre of a voice heard by all. And he and I and those of us who are blick are coal strong as a furnace in a northern factory. As dark as my father's village after rain. Have you ever been held by the night? Her strong, blick arms cloaking you from this alabaster world. And whenever I'm tired, she'll turn off the light. Allow me to disappear into kinder shadows. Embroider my mother's body into the nocturnal sky. Thank you, that's Blick. And then I'm gonna, this next one's called Stories of Boys to Men. Stories of boys to men. I know of boys who have killed and have been killed. Boys who would die for postcodes and houses they do not own. Who hold their 14-year-old brother's hands and mold it around knives, hammers, blades, their knuckles unkissed gang signs. I know of husbands who sleep lopsided, one eye on the fire escape, the other on a nursing wife. Wallahi, she's seen the back of him running more times than she's opened the front door to his salon. I know boys who smile at me in respect, whose names paralyze the ear. Boys who I differentiate by dusk and dawn with their limited eye. I know of young men who survived desert walk along godless plains, Kenyan refugee camps inside crates. Kenyan refugee camps inside crates. The grieving sea, cold hands feverishly pulling at fabric. Those who died to arrive safe. I know of fathers who burn their memories and frayed their tongues, men who have gained nothing, whose children are conscripted to the war they fled, turning the streets, the living rooms, their mothers' wombs into graveyards. And I know those women who wear emptiness like phones that ring out unanswered, mothers whose backs buckle under the weight of storms. And I know of the sisters who keep tally. Wisdom. Obviously, I'm really lucky to teach in a really wonderful school in Sheffield, and I've taught in a lot of kind of schools. And I found myself, when I was teaching the literature, power and conflict, there were at times where my students were directly experienced war, whereas with me and my parents, war was kind of an inherited thing. It was my parents' disruption to life, and I'm very well aware that I was privileged enough not to experience it. So I felt, when they told me, a lot of them didn't like the anthology, and they were like, it's not like that. So this is about some of the conversations we had. So this is called What Ahmed Told Me in GCSE English, and it's published in Poetry Birmingham, which is a really, really good if anyone's interested in poetry. What Ahmed Told Me in GCSE English. War is not that deep. Wallah, these poets are moving mad in this anthology. It's not about fishers, grandfathers, or holding a photo of somebody else's death. There are no similes to compare it to. When they bombed my secondary school, it was summer every day. And we discovered you can find footballs in rubbles. We kicked them across the powdery streets like the Kirby you play here, always keeping close tally. Nobody argued about collecting balls from behind knee-length fences or the neighbour's zaytun tree. Although I remember my mother stopped sleeping through the Dhuhr siesta, and her eyes looked like small buttons whenever she watched me win. Thank you. Let me go back to here. I found poetry later on in life, because I didn't really connect it to its school. It was after sort of Somalia is known as the nation of poets, and connecting kind of with my grandmother. It was like our shared sort of thing. And I love how poetry is so democratic and it belongs to the people. And you do not even have to be literate in Somalia to say poetry. It's like poetics are very much part of the everyday life. And I remember a couple of years ago seeing the same kind of negative sort of portrayal of it in the media that I kind of disconnected, as I go from Somali. So this is called Tales. I want to read a novel about Somalis that isn't trauma. Set it before the war and after my grandfather's birth. In this story, we're wearing 70s olive oil afros, decolletage bare on family photos, backdrop by hand-painted palm trees and ocean views. We're not pirates, but mermaids, lazing by crystalline lagoons, sheaths hoisted to the waist, buoyant youth swimming to charm out in coral crowds, the rainforest of our sea. On the beach, there is no blood, only vendors reciting poetry. There are no droughts on these dry pages. Turn a leaf and drift to the salt at Dhuhr and see how we barter and flirt in the baking hours, wearing the richness of our language in idle talk, like well-oiled summers. In the spine of this book, schoolgirls will fall in illicit love on abandoned Ferris wheels, then emerge mighty from girlhoods like the mountains of Sheikh. Our men will be the heroes for once, their webbed hands scaled in tenderness, The word colonialism is nowhere in this manuscript. The epilogue speaks of a character afloat with handed down culture, waving off Ayeo, returning to Berbera. The antagonist will be us, swimming in deep water, for we cannot exist without fault. And we do not need to look to other lands for treasures to adorn us. Abundant gales, coals, frankincense, hand-drawn depictions of nomads, and shining green-blue dress, billowing from its title. I'm gonna do, well, good for, so yeah, that is me. Thank you so much for asking me. It was a very, very informative and wonderful day. A lot of kind of my school heroes were on here, and I was like, oh, good.
Thank you so much for sharing those with us. They were beautiful, beautiful words. So thank you so much, Rada.
I think we'll bring Mark. Mark's a poet as well, so we'll bring Mark in for that, because I was like, that was insane.
That was beautiful. That was one. Thank you so much, Ward. I loved that.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Brilliant stuff. So, Mark, thank you so much for coming back.
That's all right.
You know, everyone was going off on Twitter and on our chats this morning with you. So I'm pleased that Tom managed to twist your arm and get you back. So I'm happy.
It's been lovely. I've loved it. I really enjoyed Freya's presentation earlier as well. I thought it was really interesting for me, as someone who has to work with young people, you know, on writing so much. I've learned loads today. It's been amazing.
Thanks, Mark. I'll tell you what we're going to do, Mark. We're going to, if it's all right with you, we're going to start with your classic track, Inset Day.
Okay.
And play a bit of that. Is that all right to start off with?
Yeah. It's a music video all about Inset Day. Why not? We can do a bit of that.
I love it. Okay, here we go.
Such a rude awakening, first day back, already seems you're late again. Get something down your shower, ferret round and find your trousers. Yeah, you're on a downer, but it's time you started breaking in those new shoes. Grab those sticks of boo-hoo, folders and your safety pin. Squeeze them in the car the one day that you'll make it in without being blocked in the car park. Everything is easier, but everything is half-assed. As you're walking through the building, you talk to Ben and Nikki. They look totally different from the day that you broke up. Nikki's slimmer, Ben is toned up. Still we know it's over because they're handing out some donuts. Now you're waiting for the meeting to start. It seems like Lisa and Mark both look exceedingly sharp, but there's no need for alarm. They each received TLRs. Their heads wearing sandals and their sleeves with no arms. It's insane. Stocking up on printed paper, leaving tricky things till later, trying not to cry in front of all the data. It's Inset Day. Lottie's been to Camden. Ryan's grown a man bun. You'd love to have a chat, but there's no chance. They're projecting up some graphs and nobody understands them. Time for tea and snacks, but you're being held to ransom. Danny seems to think that it's a slam dunk. Each time he puts his hand up, you feel a little queasy at the back. Cause Jenny's feet have blisters and she's hoping she can lance them. Now it's time for breakout groups, so you wait confused. It seems the info that they gave to you makes no sense. So you chat, and when it's time to present, you just paraphrase the info that another group said. The contents of each sandwich is increasingly random. The queue falls apart, everyone starts grabbing them. Lottie says the chaos is reminding her of Camden. Alright Lottie, yeah we got it, you gotta go to Camden. It's Inset Day.
Oh my god.
Isn't it mad thinking like missing, like I hope we get back to that. You know, weirdly, you know, I think when I wrote it, it was kind of a loving kind of like Mick take out of the whole day in a way, but it feels quite nostalgic now, looking back at it.
Oh, honestly, I just beam every time I'm watching that. I'm just laughing my head off, like from the first opening piano every time I watch it. It's just so
It's
funny.
just turn on. That's why it's so funny. It just hits the nail on the head.
Oh, thanks. Well, do you know what? I made it as part of a project called Mark Can't Rap. So I was really concerned at the time that I didn't understand. Still don't understand really why we have so many young people that are so passionate about rap lyrics and writing rap, and yet so many of those young people feel kind of unwelcome within English classrooms, or feel that it's something that we kind of treat as if it's worth nothing within our classrooms, within our curriculum. So I spent a podcast series interviewing rappers. It's called Mark Can't Rap. If you want to check it out, it's a free podcast. I find it fascinating, the journey through rap, and they taught me how to put that together during the process of the series. We've got a new series coming out in autumn, which is going to be how to navigate COVID thanks to rap, and there will be a parents' evening music video for that one. So.
That sounds good. So who is your favorite rapper, Mark?
Oh,
give us your top three.
Top three. Oh gosh. Okay, so I would say Andre 3000 has probably got to be in there. I think
good shout.
Andre 3000, I think, has been amazing. It's been really sad for me losing MF Doom, who's I think if you want to listen to an incredibly rich wordsmith that can make you realize just how dense and complex rap can be. His writing is like a flow of consciousness. I think it's amazing, MF Doom. And I guess, I do quite like Action Bronson. I've been kind of like sometimes some of his lyrics, he comes out in he's a really great example of like someone who just swerves with his rhyme schemes and has original combinations of stuff, which you never expect. So I sometimes enjoy listening to him as well.
Also, I'm going to go through some rappers now, and you can say bin or win.
Oh, geez. Okay. Oh, I'm definitely authorized for this. That's great.
If that's okay.
Yes, okay. Fine by me. It's fine by me.
Tiny Temper.
Okay, yeah. Win, yeah.
Jay-Z.
Yeah, win. Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah.
Stormzy.
Win. I'm probably going to say win to all of these. I reckon. Keep going.
Common.
Yeah, win.
Most Def.
Yeah, most Def win. Yeah, 100%.
Okay,
Most Def
has got some showing up all the rappers he knows.
Most Def has got some incredible work. Yeah, all of these guys are great. I think you said Honey G. I might have gone bin, but I think that's about it.
Nice.
That's a who. I shouldn't say that. I don't know, but anyway, I think it is. Blast from the past.
Yeah, but for me, I think, to be honest, like as someone, when I was teaching English and we were focused on poetry and writing creatively, the moment I started giving up my authority on what was and wasn't classed as effective creative writing and listening to my students and learning from them, I think my life just massively improved as a teacher and as someone who wanted to be creative. I think rap is fascinating and lyrics are fascinating, and I would love it if this new series of Mark Can't Rap helps teachers find new ways they can bring rap into the classroom.
Yeah.
Now I know you've given me a second video, Mark. Do you want me do you want me to play that now?
Yeah, okay. So we've been making these with some Arts Council funding. So if anyone is looking for some extra poetry videos and resources, one of these is going to be dropping every Wednesday. First Wednesday of every month on my website, markchris.com. There's a free teaching resource, and it's suitable for Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3. It's been put together by me and a couple of really good teachers. Yeah, by all means, yeah, this is just like a
okay. I'll play the video, and then we'll hand over to you if you want to talk about it at the end.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
I refuse. I refuse. An outfit made of sequins. Insisting that I always breathe in and out. I refuse.
Yeah, so these are a series of different poems that enable you to have discussions about language and positive mental health as well. So we've got one called I Refuse, which is about a child who refuses to do every single thing that's ever suggested to him. We have one called The Woman Across the Road from Me, which is about me noticing an older lady across the road watching me and how my behavior changes. And I start to realize that I'm actually making myself quite unhappy because I'm thinking about trying to perform in front of a crowd all the time, which I think I certainly found when I was trying to work with young people who were kicking off sometimes, it was pretty useful to get them to reflect on, were they performing for someone else or for themselves that day? And we've got some other bits and pieces all about making the most of each day during a pandemic. So, Carla, Ms. Wilson, fully agree. I've got a really nice. I did a piece with him on Byron a little while ago for BBC Teach, and it was absolutely mind-blowing to just spend time with him, listening to him just chat about literature and what he thinks of literature.
We've got some coming in as well. Dizzy Rascal.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep it. I just don't know why we can't get these things into the. Why it seems to be such an obstacle to get these things into the classroom. Well, I think I do. I think it's a part of the institutional racism that we exist with. But I think if you want to learn ways to dismantle this, I really hope that Mark Crump Series 1, if you check it out on podcast, I think it should help you make that journey and work out how you can bring those into the classroom. And absolutely, Guru, 100% on Guru as well.
I've always found, Mark, that actually using rap in the classroom where you can, there's allusion to teach that to pupils, metaphor, all those kind of techniques that we get them to look in boring white men's 19th century literature. Actually, it's all there in our modern day rap. So
the multisyllabic assonant rhyme schemes that rappers are utilizing are so much more complex than a lot of the rules that we kind of have followed in our poetry. I was chatting to an MC the other day. This is about a year and a bit ago at a party. And he's like, I can rhyme anything, mate. And I was like, all right, cool. And so I said, monster raving loony party. And he went, what? And I said, go on, monster raving loony party. And he thought for a bit. And because, like most MCs, he doesn't hear consonant sounds anymore. He only hears vowels, because vowels are where the power and the energy of a word come from, because there's so much airflow that's released with vowels. He heard monster raving loony party. He thought for a moment, he went, okay, monster raving loony party, concentrated fruit and barley. And I went, okay, yeah, cool. That absolutely fits. Concentrated fruit and barley. That's like an 8-syllable assonant rhyme that he's just be able to kind of pull out the top of his head. I don't know many teachers that can do it. So I find it fascinating. And if we can find ways to kind of bring rap into the classroom and to acknowledge that maybe we don't know, it's okay to not be cool and not get it, but to be learning yourself. I think that's amazing. But yeah, see how it goes. But yeah, that's there if you fancy checking it out. And I think the next series is looking really good, even though it's been tough at times, kind of documenting what COVID's been doing to the world of rap and poetry as well.
Mark, thanks so much for
that's all right.
Opening and closing.
Oh, that's fine. You're very, very welcome, guys. Would you like a poem? I don't have to read one.
Yes, yes, most definitely, please.
Okay.
Yes.
I can give you a poem. Do you know, I wasn't sure what to do. I have a poem that I'd never read anymore. It's got a swear in it. I won't swear. So I'll go I'll go like it. You can get what the word is going to be, because I say it a few times. I just wrote this about teaching, and I don't know if anyone ever feels like this, but it might be nice to share it with other people that kind of maybe know it. It's called Still the Kids Don't Give a... It goes like this.
We got that.
Okay, cool. You try to plan for everything. You smile each day, you let them in. You tell them they're intelligent, and still the kids don't give a hit. But you head away reflecting that you'll fix it in your lesson plans. No filler, no digressions, and yet still the kids don't give a hit. So you start to worry, ask for help, you take on the advice. You replay days they weren't engaged in fitful dreams throughout the night. Pretty soon your time is spent applying words of wisdom to lesson plans longer than Apple's terms and conditions. And you make displays. You start laminating. Apply for extra IT training, hours at the copier waiting. Still the kids don't give a hit. That role play that you thought was fun, that really moving scene that's from that sitcom that you loved when young, well, still the kids don't give a hit. You purchase books with stocky headings, try to make sure fun's embedded, differentiate the questions, chuck in the odd Towie reference, coax them out of disagreements, pin their work from small to floor to ceiling. But each week you can't believe it. Nothing changes. Nothing sticks. Not one piece of info shifts till inside you something flips. You turn and say, right, listen, kids, I've spent whole terms amassing failure. I've been warden, fused with entertainer, chat show host, and lion tamer, farting scissors, sitting paper. I studied this. I worked for ages for lifeless stares from bored teenagers. I could throw a hand grenade and no one here would notice it. And they'll sit there and stare right back. Well, pain shoots up and your knees go slack, and it seems you're having a heart attack, and still the kids don't give a hit. But what's that fallen from your pocket? A little wrapped up piece of chocolate. Oh, look how they stare upon it. Oh, they give us it. Oh, it's okay. Don't call for help. Just work through questions 6 to 12. That goes to whoever's scoring well. Oh, they give us it. While you do that, I'll just lie down. I feel a little tired now, but carry on. I'm really proud. It's great when you're all doing it. Cool. Thank you very much, guys.
Brilliant, Mark. Thank you so much.
That was really, really good fun to be with you today, and I've loved seeing everything else that's been going on. Have a great day, and I hope everyone's doing all right. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Mark. Cheers, mate.
Bye. And so that brings us to a close for today. We've got a few small administrative things to do. So one of which being announcing who's won our selfie competition, which we'll come to in a minute. There are 2 quick pleas from me, and we will be tweeting out these links. I don't know if Tom's about to put them up on the screen. Maybe not. First is the link to if you want to sign up and join my team. Please do.
Oh, I haven't got that in my banners, but Kate.
That's okay. We can put it on the Twitter. That's not a problem. I'd really appreciate you to come and join us. We really want to keep running these. We really want to expand these. I get so much pleasure with networking and seeing you guys interacting, learning from our speakers. As Tom said, I'm an English teacher, and so I'm just wanting to share that kind of space of learning and CPD and that subject specific, which we don't always get in schools. We don't have that opportunity to do that in schools, and the fact that we're able to offer it for free is a really big important part of what we do for me. So please do come and join us and help out, and hopefully Tom has mentioned the free bar that we do have, but that's one of the draws. But the face-to-face element at this point, I'll happily have it with an orange juice. So thank you very much for that. Also, we will be sending out a feedback form. Obviously, we love feedback, bit of purple penning. But if you could let us know what you thought went really well this time, and also what you'd potentially improve upon. And there is a question in there about the kind of element of face-to-face versus online. We would have never been able to fit as many of you in one place at one time and have such an international spread of speakers. So I just kind of want to gauge how you feel about the face-to-face element, online element. Do you want us running a little bit of both, or would you like to solely go back to the face-to-face? And just kind of give us that feedback as well, and we will take that on board and we will use that. So thank you very much for both of those. But now the important part, Tom, the winners.
Yes, the winners. So we have 7 people who have won the prizes today. So the first one is this is for Kate Jones's wonderful books. They're here. We've got number 1. Hang on, let me get the right ones. Retrieval Practice Part 1, Retrieval Practice Part 2, and also Love to Teach. This is in one pack for @Declan Yeoman. @Declan Yeoman. I think Kate's written this. I think it's DECLAN and then YEOMAN, I think. You have won all of Kate Jones' books. Okay. Then we have Damon Hesford. Damon Hesford, you have won a £10 Amazon voucher. Another £10 Amazon voucher for Mrs. C. That's @Mrs. C Teaching. Lana Ali, that's Miss Ali English. You have won one of Stuart Price's books. You lucky person. @Marcus Stanforth, you have also won another one of Stuart Price's books. Then we have Yamina. Yamina, you have won Sarah Mullins' goodie bag pack of goodies, of Edu goodies. We will be sending these out to you soon. Now I've got, I think I've got one more, which is another Amazon voucher, which is Mrs. W English. That's @A Right English for another Amazon voucher. They are the prizes for the selfie competition that we've been running today. While I'm still on, recording and resources. Now, this is how we're going to do it for this event. The link for registering for the recording and resources is in the TMEnglishicons Twitter bio. So it's listed as the website. So if you just go to the Twitter account for TMEnglishicons, if you click into the link in the bio, you then sign up there. That recording and the PDF resources will appear in there probably in about 24 hours time. In this 24-hour period now, you'll still be able to watch everything on YouTube. In 24 hours, the YouTube content will be locked, but you'll still be able to access the big marker recording and resources for the next 30 days. And in 30 days' time, we will even unlock the YouTube as well. Forever, it will be there. But if you want to access for the next 30 days for free, you need to sign up to that link on the Twitter bio to access the recording and the resources and everything else we're going to pile in there. Just before I hand back to Lizzie, I've got a lot of thank yous to do. The first one is to Lizzie for presenting this entire event today so impeccably. There's been a hell of a lot to take on. We've had about 20, 25 speakers who've been absolutely insanely good. And Lizzie's had to juggle a lot. So well done, Lizzie. And thank you for everything you've done today. Behind the scenes, Kate Jones, a very good friend of mine, has been behind the scenes doing all our social media today. And I said in the tweet earlier, it's like having Zinedine Zidane of the Twitter world kind of coming on for the last 20 minutes to do all our tweeting. So, Kate, thank you ever so much for taking over the TM English Icons account today and doing that. I did ask her to come on here, but apparently she's got rollers in her hair, so she can't come on. I just get on here. But anyway, she's somewhere out there. Thank you. I'd
like to thank Tom before he goes off onto another tangent there, because obviously, as you know, it's just me at the moment doing this, and with COVID in schools and everything around, Tom has stepped up and helped me organise this time round because I needed someone else to help me. So I'm really, really appreciative for Tom for finding such fantastic speakers, because that's been completely down to him. And then my other thank you, which is I'm imagining where Tom was about to go with his, is thank you to all of the fantastic people who have spoken today. We have covered, as I said at the beginning, English is such a wide curriculum matter, and I'm pretty certain we've had a touch point at every kind of corner of the English world today, thanks to the fantastic teach meets and our fantastic keynotes, and also our wonderful guest speakers of Wada and Mark for joining us as well and giving up their time to speak with us. So thank you very much to them. And lastly, thank you to you guys for engaging with us, tweeting. We were trending at one point, which was pretty cool, but also watching your comments come through on the YouTube and the Periscope as well. It's been really wonderful to see that kind of networking still happening, even though we're in our own individual isolations doing this digitally. I do think that we've not necessarily lost that element so much, which was wonderful too.
Yeah, it's just a final shout to our sponsors as well. That's Pupil Progress, Wellbe, GCSE Simplified, and TES Resources, who help us do all our events. And obviously, if you want to donate to keep these events free, keep our recordings and resources free, there's no obligation, obviously, to donate. But if you want to buy us a coffee, so it says, then you can go to that link and donate. That'd be much appreciated, and we will message you if you do that. That's it. That's it, Lizzie. We're going to head off now into the abyss. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you all. We'll see you soon.